see here. Oh, I'm talking. Oh, it says it hears me talking. Look at that shit. All right. I guess we'll find out. I think it's the next couple weeks. So we'll see what happens. All right. All right. I'll talk to you after this. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Yep. Bye. Oh, you can raise your hand. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Well, I guess I could have shaved this morning. Hmm. Okay.
Morning, Jim.
Good morning, Doug. How are you this morning?
Good. I don't know why this is set up that I have to admit people into the meeting, but
Oh,
anyway.
yeah. I was just learning a few things about it because I have not used a laptop, so I've been playing around this morning.
What I've actually been doing is I've got the laptop, and because that's actually my desktop, but I can't connect to the audio and stuff through that because of using the laptop. So then I use my phone for the Zoom audio and all that stuff. So I go back and forth between the laptop and phone.
Okay.
And everything. Yeah, this is set up though for some reason. I don't know if I can change that to, it makes me admit people, which I'm not sure why. I think
I
Kate
had
was
your
with
problem
us
last
too.
night. I didn't sleep.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Thinking too much.
Yeah, it's not exactly fun. So it says Kate is here, but I don't see her on the participant list.
Neither do I. I just see you and me.
Yeah. But up at the top of my screen here, it says that she's says she's there. I don't know, maybe she's not quite ready yet. Let's say there's 4 participants, but
Now, I see you, me, and Town of Canandaigua as host.
yeah, so I'm logged on my laptop as Town of Canandaigua, or on my desktop as Town of Canandaigua.
Okay.
And then my phone is just me.
I do not like the way I look on camera.
Nobody ever does.
I saw when it popped up, like, oh my.
Nobody ever does. Nobody ever does. Let's see. Oh, There we go. I can uncheck that so participants can automatically enter. And then I think people can come directly in. So,
This would be an easy meeting for us if it's just you and I.
I'm thinking there'll be a few more.
I think it too.
Excellent. Okay, I think I've got it unchecked so people don't show up in the waiting room. There's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
We see Linda. We don't have audio yet for Linda, but we can see you.
Morning, Linda.
Let's see. Hey there.
How are you today?
Good morning.
Hi, Kate.
And there's Kate.
Morning.
Good morning.
There's two of me.
I mean, you get twice as much done today.
Wow. Should work out well.
So, do we get to click on raise hand when I want to speak? Is that how we do this?
Okay.
Usually people just yell out.
All right. Well,
What are they doing?
It's too early. I have visitors.
what in the?
Oh no, he's got the coronavirus shield on.
He has to go to the grocery store, so we won't let him in the house. Like, you know.
You thought it was gonna be kids.
I know. My husband's worse than the kids are.
I think cabin fever is set in there.
Mhm.
I got the Rona.
Oh, there's the
Sam.
baby Sophie.
I brought the
Wait,
baby.
wait.
Oh, that's good. We like babies. Oh, look how cute she is.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is cute.
So cute.
Big.
Hey.
No, she loves babies.
Listen, back end does not compare to babies.
Hi everyone.
Good morning, Kathy. Good
Morning,
morning,
Kathy.
Jean. Good morning, Tina.
Morning, Jim.
It's Dan.
She might be in
That's it.
Dan's office.
Do I look like a Dan?
I hope
There's a
not.
lot you guys should know. A lot has changed over the past couple months.
Sounds like
That's
it.
so funny.
We're gonna fix that.
You got your Irish coffee there, Linda.
I do. I wish mine was Irish.
Hey, Kathy. All right.
Maybe Irish creamer. That's about. Yeah.
Go put the baby away, Sam. She brings a little happiness around
Yes.
everybody.
So cute.
And my dog's barking.
Oh,
When it rains, it pours. That's for
a
sure.
little chihuahua.
What did I do?
Hi, Jean. Jean, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
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 Good morning, this is Gary.
Hi, Gary. You're a little bit low, but we can hear you.
How's the weather in Florida this morning?
It's gonna be a scorcher again.
All right.
So, because this is the usual time that I go out and ride the bike or something. So today I'll hide in the house all day.
Hi, Terry.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Doing
Morning,
pretty good, thanks.
Morning, Gary.
Hey, Doug,
Morning.
Morning.
take a Morning, seat, Doug.
Yeah, thanks. Just moving to the office.
Feeling.
Billing looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a second here.
Now you look like you have a halo around your head.
Yeah, I do.
There's
I'm an angel.
Oh,
St.
Lindy,
Douglas.
this is adorable.
This is my mother's dog.
Doesn't look too happy to be in the spotlight. Though.
Mine is hanging on my leg over here. It's big to pick up.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, Terry.
Caitlin, you look pretty comfy this morning.
I love working at home.
Jared.
Going to snow tomorrow, Jim?
No, it's not.
I don't know. The weather guys were saying we could get an inch or so.
Oh,
Oh.
I hope not.
Not
If
plowable.
anything, I think maybe down by Sam, they have higher elevations down there, so.
Hell yeah.
In her county.
Yeah. Gene will be stuck at home.
Yep, I will be. Can't get out the
Morning, everybody.
driveway.
Morning, Jared.
Jared.
So Doug, it's 8:01. Shall we get started, you think?
Yeah, just so you know, I'm looking at the participant list here. It looks like we've got the entire town board. We've got, obviously, the deputy town supervisor. I renamed her from Dan to Tina.
Thank you for that.
It fits you more.
A little bit more. And then we've got some staff, and I don't necessarily see any residents. It looks like we've got staff, but there is one that I'm not sure who it is, but that's okay.
At the
It's set
bottom,
up.
isn't that Gary Davis, right?
I've got Gary, I think. So, and
It
then,
might be my phone number. Doug, it might be my phone number also because my computer audio is goofy, so I use my phone audio. So
oh, okay.
I show up
Okay.
twice as a random troll and as myself.
We've
right.
got our resident. We've got a resident. I see him. I see him.
Yeah.
Morning.
Morning, Greg.
Morning, Greg.
Morning.
Morning.
Great.
Morning.
Happy Thursday.
You.
So Linda, anytime you're ready. Okay.
Okay, yeah, no, a couple minutes ago I said it was 8 o'clock. Do we want to start? Maybe it was what might have been while we were moving around. So my thought today was to review the revenue forecast and then discuss implications for the spending forecast. And Doug has prepared some information for us and sent some things out in advance. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Doug to run us through revenue.
Sure, sure. And what I'll do is I'll go line by line, exactly where I'm getting these figures and where I'm estimating things. I've had over the last 3 weeks now. How long have we been doing this? I don't know. It seems like time.
Seems like
It's like forever, but probably
Yeah,
3
whatever.
weeks.
Yeah, I've had a lot of interaction with obviously a lot of you that are on this meeting today, as well as a lot of folks from the International City Managers Association. I've talked with the New York State Association of Towns. I've talked with a lot of the town supervisors in the area. I've talked with the comptroller's office, just trying to understand. I mean, this is tough for all of us because we don't have any solid numbers to base things on right now. A lot of what we're doing is estimating based on where we think things are going to go or how things are going to play out. I am being told that we should start to get some actual data on what March might look like, hopefully in time for the April town board meeting. It could come as early as next week. Hopefully we'll have that before that April, I think it's 20th town board meeting. But again, that's just even that, those numbers are going to be a really early snapshot of what is going on, because those are going to take into account essentially what was going on in March as we were getting started with this. We're probably not going to know true numbers until we get to later in May, and then as we go proceed into June. But you know, one of the things that I'll share with you, I was talking with Jack Marin, who you all know is the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. And let me just give you an example. Eastview Mall generates $1.2 million every day in revenue on average. $1.2 million. For the last 30 days, they've generated zero. That is going to be a huge economic impact, sales tax wise, and what we've lost for that. Many of you know, and the town board members know, I talked with Randy Farnsworth yesterday for quite a while to understand what's happening a little bit in the auto industry. And I've got some inside knowledge on what's going on in the industry with my family situation, and seeing that there's 9 plants globally that are closed down right now that produce parts for a lot of these manufacturers. And I mean, there's going to be a huge lag time as things come back up, once things come back up. So that's going to have a domino effect and trickle down effect. And what Randy Farnsworth is telling me is that essentially they sold their last vehicle. It was about March the 12th. They haven't sold a single vehicle since then. So again, you look at the sales tax numbers there, and the loss of sales tax, and the permit fees and the DMV fees and all those types of things every time somebody buys a vehicle. Randy tells me he's hoping to be able to open up for online sales at the end of April, but that would be the absolute earliest. Additionally, what he's telling me is that he furloughed all of his staff. All the sales force is gone about 2 weeks ago, and they don't anticipate coming back. Probably, he doesn't think until June is what their conversations are. Because again, even if we got the green light from the governor on April 29th, which is the current date of his executive order, to open everything back up, it's going to take time for things to get back up and going. So again, there's going to be a huge sales tax impact there. Additionally, a lot of town board members know we've been talking about mortgage tax and the impacts of that. And I'm going to go through some of that as we go through line by line. What I've done here, I've got actually, just so you guys know, I'm on here twice. I'm on as the town of Canandaigua with my laptop here, my desktop, and then I'm also on my phone so that you can see me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see now a Excel spreadsheet, a simple Excel spreadsheet. And what this is the highway fund. And what I want to do here is go line by line of revenue, and then we'll talk about expenditures. Predominant funds to look at today are the highway fund and the general fund. The general fund is a little bit more complex. There's a lot of moving pieces with that. The highway fund, we've got, well, it's not any easier. It's a few less lines for us to kind of go through detail by detail. So what I have here on this spreadsheet for the highway fund, and this is a little bit of a variation versus what I had emailed out to you town board members. We had to make a minor modification, really, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I've got the first row right here, this row right here. This is what the 2020 adopted budget is. Then what I've got here next to it is a proposed budget amendment for your consideration so that we still have a balanced budget. And then an outlier looking at planning ahead at the years 21, 22, and 23. So what I'll just do is go kind of start here line by line. Any questions before I get started?
Nope.
Okay. So this line that, again, I have highlighted here right now, that's the adopted line. And what I'm going to talk about as we go through this here is the column next to it, which is the proposed and then the outlying years. So tax levy. Tax levy is the property tax that we collect from the residents that we then attribute to both the highway fund and the general fund. The tax levy for 2020 the budget that we had adopted was $865,000. We've already collected that money. The town clerk has already received that. She's already made us whole. We already have that $865,000 that's already gone into the highway fund. Nothing to worry about on the tax levy side of that at this point. You can also see kind of the outline here is here where I'm talking about, just while we're talking about this line. I'm also proposing to keep that same because, as you know from the email that I've sent you, I'm trying to, and obviously it's complete town board decision, but what I'm showing you is a vehicle to keep the tax rate steady flat at $1.03 per thousand for the next 3 years. So that tax levy of $865,000, that stays the same even with the budget amendments and for the next couple of years. Okay. Sales tax. This is where it starts to get tricky, the next line down. So we had appropriated as part of the sales tax that we were to receive for 2020, $2.4 million to the highway fund. The number that I'm showing you here of 1.560, you can see is 65% of that budgeted amount. That is a loss of 35% of the anticipated sales tax revenue. Now, again, like I was just talking about, it's a shot in the dark. Pick a dartboard, throw a dart at it, and let's put a number on it and what the revenue is going to be. But we've seen guidance from the comptroller's office that says we could be looking at a 20-25% loss. I've talked with other municipalities, for instance, in my conversation with Jack Marin, he's, I think, generally thinking somewhere in the same 30 to 40, 45% loss. I'm kind of like right in the middle here with this projection of a 35% loss in sales tax. Again, the longer this goes on, the less sales tax revenue we're going to have coming in. So right now we know that this is going to go all through the month of April. We don't know at this point if this will get extended into May. 35%, I mean, you're almost talking about the loss of essentially a quarter, which is about what you're talking about here, between half of March, all of April, possibly some into May. And then again, the ramp up from there of what happens as this goes forward. What I'm showing you here in the outline years is an increase. And, you know, again, this could change here a little bit. What I'm showing you here is that we would get 70% of that budgeted amount, then showing you that we would get 80% and then 90% of that originally $2.4 million that we had budgeted for 2020. You know, it's again, it's just so hard to say on the sales tax. We're hoping that we'll start to see some numbers here in another week or two, but you know, that's my best recommendation to you is that we, again, plan for at least this 35% loss in sales tax revenue. If by some miracle, the sales tax isn't that bad, we have additional revenue coming in from that. There's a stimulus funding as part of phase 4 that does come out. Then we can go back in and add some expenses or things that we put off now to make up that difference or still obviously have the balanced budget. But again, just planning for that worst case scenario on that side of things. Okay. Now this is just for the highway fund. We'll talk about the general fund separately in a little bit, but does anybody have any questions on that piece before I move on to the next line?
I don't have a question, Doug, but I guess what I just want to confirm, what we're really talking about is making a budget amendment now because we know that things are not going to be the way that we planned it. So making a new balanced budget for this year. The farther out years are nothing that we're ever going to touch until the right time when we do that budgeting, but that's just for planning.
Correct.
So we're really only talking about a change to the 2020 budget. And right now what we're proposing is probably something that seems fairly drastic, but very believable. And we can always, if things change like Doug says, we can have a COVID-1 budget, and then in a few months, if things start to get beautiful again, we could go back to a COVID-2 budget. You know, we could make another budget adjustment, is my thought on it. And is that what you were thinking, Doug?
Exactly. So the outline years, again, there's nothing for us to do with that. We'll adopt those budgets at the appropriate times. But this is just a look ahead, have a snapshot looking ahead of what it might look like in those future years. And again, to have a plan, a basic plan, so that we can keep that tax rate, at least what it would look like if we keep the tax rate flat at $1.03. Again, ultimately, the town board could decide to raise it or lower it or whatever the case at the appropriate time. But this is just a snapshot financial plan to say, hey, this is about what it would look like if we were to keep that tax rate flat based on these revenue projections. So the next line here is the CHIPS money. The CHIPS money is the state reimbursement amount that we get from New York State relative to highway work. This is difficult. $260,000 was our adopted budget amount. That was, I think we had budgeted slightly down from the year prior because of some rumblings that we kept hearing out of Albany. This budget line came under threat a little bit last year when the state was adopting their budget for the previous year, not the most recent budget adoption that was just done. The other thing that's going on with state money is, as I think everybody knows, with the budget that just got adopted by the governor or in the state legislature, the governor has a lot of flexibility to essentially withhold funds from the local municipalities and from others, or to essentially slowly make those payments, spread them out over different quarters, or keep some of it depending on what's going on with the current healthcare related situation, as well as the COVID-19 situation and the expenditures. And there's a lot of flexibility for the governor to make adjustments as things move forward. So what I've done here is actually estimating 75% of what was anticipated for that CHIPS money that we were going to receive for 2019 or 2020, I'm sorry, 75% of that budget amount. Again, that's essentially the loss of one quarter, but the governor has the flexibility to quarter by quarter reduce funding, or to hold it back, or maybe it doesn't come this year, maybe it comes into next year. Because keep in mind, the other thing that we have to be concerned about from our perspective is our financial year is January 1st to December 31st. The state's fiscal year is April 1st to March 31st. So if the governor delays some of these payments over to get it closer to the next year, we're going to lose it in our current fiscal year because it would come over in the next year. So that's why, yes, 75% seems like of that budget amount, or 25% of that set, you know, the loss of a full quarter essentially of CHIPS funding, you know, that does seem drastic, but I think it's entirely possible with the current situation that we're facing. The next line over shows us receiving 85% of that CHIPS money, 95% in the next year, and then the full amount the final year. Again, with what you're going to see in both the highway fund and the general fund, what I'm showing you is that through the year 2023, you know, everything that I keep talking to the, you know, some of the quote unquote experts, and who knows who's an expert, because we've never faced a worldwide situation like this since any of us have been around. I keep being told this is going to take years to overcome this, to get the economy fully back up to speed. So again, that's what I'm showing you, a gradual increase on these revenue lines over a 3-year period, trying to get them back up to the 2020 level. Before we move on from CHIPS, any questions or comments on CHIPS funding? And Jim, did you have anything you wanted to add on CHIPS funding?
For this year, I'm trying to schedule our work early as possible. CHIPS works that the town has to receive the invoice, pay it upfront, submit the invoice paperwork, and a canceled check to be reimbursed. So I'm working with our vendors to try to be as quickly out the door as possible to get whatever funding we can before and if they change the funding levels to us.
So Jim, what's that seasonality as it looks across would be Canandaigua's second quarter and Canandaigua's third quarter. Is there any difference between those two quarters financially?
Say that one more time, Greg, I'm sorry.
In quarter two, which we are in now, in quarter three, starting July 1st, is there any difference in the balance of those two aggregated numbers at the quarterly level based on seasonality? What you just said was, and I agree with what you just said, you're going to go get what you can get while you can get it. It's what I heard you say for Q1, right?
Yes.
And I think that's exactly the right strategy. And I just want to make sure that we're not dependent on a strong third quarter of revenue generation through chips, or whether you are or not. It's just a question. So
I'm going to go after all that as
hard
quickly as
early, right?
possible to get it.
Right, hard early. I think it's a really good strategy. Really good strategy.
Any other questions or comments on chips? No. Okay. So the next line is services from other governments. And Jim, do you just want to touch base on, I see services is spelled wrong. I'll fix that while you're talking, but what that is?
That's our snow plowing for the county. And I believe some of it is for revenue from mowing on 332.
I
I
believe
don't have
that's
the
correct.
budget in front of me, but I believe that's what it's for,
Correct.
those two items.
Yes. And so, hopefully we're showing that to remain flat. Probably not going to see any increase. We'll have to, look at that as we go and everything, but maybe there'll be a slight increase, but that's showing relatively flat.
Isn't the mowing on 332, excuse me, the mowing on 332 that you're talking about, Jim, comes from the state, doesn't it?
Correct.
I would wonder how solid that is.
Terry, we're going to pass it at the board meeting to get back to the state, the agreement. So it's like $5,200, Terry. So I don't think that's really going to affect their budget. The bigger number is the snow plowing from the county.
Yeah. Okay.
The next line here is sale of equipment. We had anticipated receiving $39,000 from sale of equipment for the highway department for this year. Proposing or essentially showing that remains flat. Jim's got some stuff at auction right now that's doing okay, especially given the situation. These outline numbers are always fluid based on any given year, any vehicles we're replacing, what we're proposing to sell, etc. For a placeholder, what I did was essentially keep it on the low side of things, because I think one of the things as we start looking at expenses, you're going to see is we're not going to be able to buy the same number of pieces of equipment over the next couple of years that maybe what we've done in the past. So I think the sale of equipment line is going to be on the light side, because I also think that we're going to have to hold on to some of that equipment for a while. We'll look at that for a second in a minute. Appropriated fund balance is the amount that we get essentially it's not amount that we get, but it's the amount that we appropriated each year to balance the budget from essentially the next year's or the prior year's revenue. So essentially what happens is we have, at the end of the year, we have a little bit of money left that goes into unassigned fund balance for the highway department. Then we appropriate some of that money to help balance the budget and help it make sure it's a balanced budget for the budget that we adopt. So for 2020, we had adopted the budget with an appropriation of $295,070. That was fairly consistent with things that we have done in the past. That was based on us not using all of the money essentially in 2020. Those appropriations don't happen until December 31st. And what we would be able to do is take some of the money that's left over from the current years, from the 2020 year, and then we'd be able to appropriate that to balance the budget. Obviously, we're not going to have as much money December 31st, 2020 as what we thought we were going to have when we started this year. So lowering, pretty significantly there, the appropriated fund balance to help offset this budget. The other thing about highway is highway really has no fund balance, essentially. The general fund has a healthy fund balance. The highway fund really doesn't. So again, trimming this up light a lot to make that number a lot lighter, provides us with the ability to balance out this budget with these budget amendments, as you can see here from this number on the screen. You guys can see my cursor, right? Yep. From
Yep.
this 2.9 million for revenue and 2.9 million for expenditures.
So Doug, at some point, doesn't the fund balance get depleted? I mean, is it realistic to still be able to appropriate fund balance every single year if we're in hard times?
It is, because again, theoretically, we won't use every dollar that we have budgeted for. But you can see a drastic difference there from $295,000 previously to down to that $100,000 range.
I get it for this year. I was thinking more in your out year scenario that
Right.
it won't be there forever. At some point, we're going to bottom out if we,
Correct.
you know.
Yep. Okay. So that's 2.9 million you see on the revenue side of things there. Now going to expenses. Let me jump to capital. Let's come back to personnel. We'll come back to that in a moment. Let's jump straight into the 200 lines. So the 200 lines, and I think we may have some residents that have joined us. So I'm just gonna, I know the town board knows this. On the expenditure side, I got the ledger here. We have 0.100, which is personnel, 0.200, which is capital and equipment, 0.400 contractuals, 0.600s are all the debt principal, 700s are the interest, 800s are all the medical and retirement benefits, all those types of things, and then the 0.900s are the transfers. So these are the broad categories that are assigned by the New York State Comptroller, and it's a requirement of every single municipality, every single town in the state of New York has prefixes on their account numbers. So it might be like 5110, and then like 0.200 is for equipment, 0.400 would be for contractual expenses. If there was debt owed by the highway fund, it would be under 600, 700, and then the 800s is the medical and the retirement benefits falls under the 800. The highway building that we just constructed, just so everybody, just a quick reminder, you see there is no debt or principal or interest in the highway fund. That is because the highway building itself has to be paid by the general fund, and you'll see that when we look at the general fund. So jumping to capital equipment 200. So we had budgeted to spend this year, 2020, $497,001 in capital equipment. What I am proposing is a cut, you see there, of $450,000 from that line for this year, leaving us spending $45,001. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here to the detail tab so that we can look at that. So you see here is the $497,001 that we adopted. This proposal calls to eliminate a snowplow truck that we had already ordered in the amount of $240,000. That was the budgeted amount. That's not the, and I want to be clear about that. If you are looking at your budget, and I'm just going to scroll up here. Oh, I'm sorry. Just going to scroll down here for a quick second. You see here the budget notes. Can everybody see the budget or no? You can't.
Yes.
You can see it. Okay. So you see the budgeted amount for the snowplow truck here in 513200 was $240,000. Just so you know, that's where that's coming from. So when I go back over to this screen here, you see that same $240,000 coming back out of that $497,001. The same for this next line, eliminating a pickup truck that, or an F-250 that we were going to order in the amount of $32,000 with the budgeted amount. And then this final line was we had proposed to spend $225,000 on a trash truck. The roll-off trucks, our current truck is pretty old. It was budgeted to spend $225,000 on that. The original proposal that I sent you earlier in the week actually eliminate, or it canceled that order. And Jim and I have been talking the last couple of days. That truck, I guess, cannot be canceled. And Jim, you can jump in with that. So what we're showing you here is still a $180,000 reduction with us still spending $45,000 out of this line. But the difference is leasing that truck for the next 4 years, since we can't cancel that order. Do you want to touch base on why we can't cancel that?
Yep. So we ordered both the plow truck and the roll-off truck in December to save ourselves 2%. And when I released, after board approval, to order the truck, the roll-off truck was being built immediately. So that truck was produced prior to the end of March coming and this pandemic that we're dealing with. So we couldn't return that truck because it was built. That's just what happens when you, with the agreement we have with Navistar or International. Now the plow truck I could cancel because the manufacturer was not going to build it till June because the supplier for snowplow equipment didn't want it till October. So that's how we got out of that truck. And then the F-250 through Van Bortle, that took a little bit of discussion, but we got out of that one also. So therefore, that's how I eliminated the plow truck and the pickup truck.
Now, Jim, the current roll-off truck is what, like a 19, do you remember the year of it?
It's a 2007 Sterling. Okay. The issue with the Sterling is we have 4 Sterlings left. Sterling no longer makes parts for their equipment, and trying to find aftermarket parts is miserable. A good example is like the ABS system on the trucks. When it goes for inspection, it doesn't pass because of the computer. It took us 6 weeks last time to find one. So the Sterlings we own currently, the sooner we can get rid of them, the better, obviously. But each time we try to find parts for any of this equipment, it usually waits several weeks before we can find it. Then we're borrowing somebody else's roll-off from another town to get the work done.
So Jim was able to, through the program, through KeyBank, he was able to identify a lease option for this at 3% interest. I think it was actually 3.25% interest. We're going to shop that a little bit more and see if we can get a little bit better rate looking at leasing. But again, this is an option since we're committed to the truck anyway, that helps preserve some of our cash flow with the unknown situation, just going ahead and leasing this truck. And then I mean, based on the age of the current truck, Jim, wouldn't you think that this new truck will probably have this for 10 or 15 years anyway?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a 10-year capital plan on our equipment now, on large equipment. So we'll keep it that long, if not longer, if we have to.
And the $45,000 payment, I want to say, was based on it was either a 4 or 5 year lease. I want to say it was a 5 year, I think.
I want to say it's a 5 year also.
Yeah. So that then brings this total of $45,001 for the total expenses here. And you see that matches up right here with the capital equipment line. The proposed reduction from $497,001 to $45,001 in capital expenses. Out years, just quickly looking at that, 150,000, 300,000, 350,000. Traditionally, we've been spending, our capital plan calls for us spending $450,000, $550,000 a year on capital equipment. And this is one of the things I just want to point out here is, hey, if we're going to keep this tax rate flat at $1.03, based on those revenue projections up above, this is what we're going to be looking at for capital equipment. So we're going to have a lean couple of years here. We're going to have to make do a little bit longer. We're probably going to have to relook at the vehicle replacement policy. We're also going to have to relook at the capital plan if this is the direction that we're going to go. So just to give everyone a heads up on that. So any comments, questions on any of that?
All I'll say to the board is, due to our progress of replacing equipment through our policy, we're in a position with our current vehicles, with the exception of a couple of Sterlings, that finding parts and equipment is maintained well enough, and I'll say new enough, that we could probably get through the next 2 years without having to buy a plow truck or heavy equipment.
Good news.
Okay. Any other comments on the equipment side of things? then moving on to the contractual side of things. So again, the budgeted amount here was $2,055,504. And what I'm showing you here is a reduction of almost $600,000, 1.4 million. So let's go over and look at the detail here. So here's that $2,055,504 that was adopted. And again, just going line by line, DA 1420-400, this is the attorney line. We had put some extra money in there this year, knowing that we were looking at potentially doing some design work on North Road, as well as if we got into a situation with some easement work, related work. We traditionally haven't spent $5,000 on that, but this would cut that line in half to $2,500, reducing $2,500. The next line is our engineering line, and the total engineering amount, we just have to jump back up, but okay, it was $75,000. The total engineering of $75,000 was predominantly for, again, we were planning to do design work for the reconstruction of North Road. Essentially, this cuts $55,000 out of that. That means we won't be doing that design work of North Road this year. It leaves about $20,000 left in that line in case something does come up, but you know, there's a pretty significant cut there. We had also budgeted $550,000, just flipping back over to the budget here. We had budgeted $550,000 for Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road, the town of Canandaigua's portion. This would cut $425,000 from that particular project out of this year's budget. Additionally, we had budgeted $145,000 for Ketchum Road, and this would cut that entirely out of this year's budget to that total of $1.4 million. So what's left in that line? There's still $100,000 for asphalt repairs left in that line. There's still $95,000 for Bristol Crossroad Culvert left in that line. There is a little bit of money left in that line, about $100,000 for Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road for some work that sounds like needs to be buttoned up, some drainage work. There's still $115,000 left in that line for Grimble Road. And then there's still $111,000 left in that line for the micro paving of New Michigan, Knapp, Bliss, and those that are in the 284 agreement. So Jim, I don't know if you want to, I don't know if you guys could see that or not.
There'll be a couple changes on, I know what the budget says, but a couple roads from this winter, like Whitefield's Road, I gotta do some drainage, asphalt repairs. So on the 284 agreement that I'm going to present to you, we'll spell out slightly different locations of work, just so you're aware of that, because I have to fix some different things just to get us through this year. We might not do, we'll do one less road of micropave, but do another road to repair from winter damage. So if there's any questions on that, it'll be on the agenda.
Jim, while you're talking there, let's talk a little bit. I've had conversations with Peter Inglesby about the Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road. I know you've had conversations with the Farmington Highway Superintendent. What Peter said to me is that they would like to do, for any material that's already been purchased, essentially to do that type of work, but hold off on purchasing new material.
Correct. So earlier this year, both towns purchased pipe, catch basins, and stone and materials to do drainage work. So we currently already paid for that. We just have to install it. And then we'll have some blacktop work to do, minor blacktop work, nothing major, to get us through this year and the winter going for this winter coming up. Then we'll look at 21 and see where we're at financially.
So Jim, just two questions. Staying on the Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road, have you checked on the price of asphalt lately?
I did. Right now, asphalt is relatively reasonable right now. Now, currently, Greg, I asked about that 2 weeks ago. The oil, though, they have are in the tanks as well. They purchased already from earlier. So
Yeah.
until they use that oil up, I'm told, and this new oil comes in, it's less expensive.
Right.
It may come down. Right now for asphalt, it's around $60 a ton, $60 a ton.
Mhm.
So,
But
which
that's
isn't
down
terrible.
measurably still, right?
Right.
And the second question, Jim, is around Ketchum Road. Are there any public safety concerns there at all if you don't touch it?
No, Greg, what it was trying to basically trim and level the road because it's so uneven when we snowplow.
Mhm.
We use so much more salt to get to, I say, melt and get the snow off the road. So we can do some T&L work to get us by this year.
Thank you.
Other questions on that? So the other thing while we are talking about this that I want to show you is, so this reduces the contractual expenses, these road repairs, from total budget of $2 million to $1.4 million. Going back to this screen here, again, looking at these outlying years, it's not a good situation. This is the revenue up here. Again, there's only so much revenue coming in for the highway fund. This $1.4 million essentially next year, 1.5 million the year after, and then 1.6 million the year after. I mean, what that tells me, and I just want to be very upfront about this, is, you know, we're used to going out and making our roads look great all over the place. Some of that maintenance may have to be delayed a little bit longer. Some of these roads, you know, it's not to say that we would ever want to put the public's safety at risk, but they may not be able to look the same that they currently do now. I mean, we may not be able to do everything, or we may have to relook at things. There's just not going to be a lot of money for road repairs when you're talking about a fraction of what we had budgeted for 2020. And keep in mind, 2020 was already reduced. And as Jim told you when we were doing the budget, and Jim, your screen may have locked up there, I'm not sure. As Jim told you, you know, there's some road repairs coming up that are going to need to be done. And this is not going to take into account that.
Yeah, I've been working on a long-term plan. I've shared a little bit with the Public Works Committee, but, you know, we need roughly 2.2 million a year to update some of these roads. North Road's a big, significant cost. We have subdivision roads that are quite old that need new pipe, catch basin, gutter, asphalt repairs. We have to finish Town Line Road. After that, we have Knott Road was another large road repair. So I'm not sure how we're going to find this funding unless the federal government gives us a lot of money or the economy really turns around quickly. We might have to put, like, what I would call lipstick on a pig and make it look pretty for a few years.
Well, it's not so much looking pretty that we should be concerned with. It's more safety driven. Now, in the Public Works Committee, we've been talking about, you know, with Jim about developing that strategic plan, you know, for our roadways, you know, something akin to what the, you know, capital equipment, trucks, vehicles, all those things. And I think the total number that you'd come up with, Jim, it hadn't been finalized or anything, but it was in the area of what, 12 to 15 million dollars.
Correct.
You know, over time. But the thing to keep in mind is that all these road repairs and all these micro pavings and all these efforts, as they get shoved out into the future, the roads that are currently in better shape that we wouldn't have to touch for a few years are going to continue to deteriorate. So, you know, I don't have any magic solution here, but I just want to point it out that delaying these projects is probably going to cost us more in the end. And we're going to wind up with a situation where some of our roads are going to demand that we do something in the interest of public safety. So right. Hopefully there is something that comes out in the future from a phase 4 or 5 or 12, whatever the feds decide to come up with. Infrastructure wise, it would help us. But, you know, focusing on these out years, you know, it's nice just to see, but our focus shouldn't be there. Our focus should be on today and perhaps next year. For one, I think the economy will come back faster than 3 years, Doug. I'll just say it that way.
Any other comments on the contractual side of things? All right.
Just wanted to say, I think, Terry, what you were saying, I think it's going to be true for almost every expenditure. It's going to come down to what's safety. That's going to be the priority, because when you're talking about having so much less revenue, that's going to be the first concern, I think, for almost every project going forward for the foreseeable future. I mean, that's kind of what we're in right now. So I think for any expenditure here that Doug's talking about, that's going to be a situation. For what it's worth. Probably what everybody was thinking anyway.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yep.
Any other comments on that? Okay. Let's look here at personnel. Personnel, and obviously the 100 and the 800 lines are directly related to each other. The more we spend on personnel, the more personnel we have, the higher the 800 line is going to be. The less the 100 line, the less the 800 line is going to be. They're directly related. So the adopted budget calls for spending $1,003,000 on personnel in the highway fund. The proposal is exactly the same for now. For the outlying years, what I'm showing is our standard 2% increase, just so that we have the numbers, again, looking ahead, having a plan for trying to keep the tax rate flat. The benefits side of things, Sam had gone through some benefits, and we, tried to sharpen the pencils there a little bit based on some numbers now that we have. Excuse me. So we're able to show a little bit of a reduction there on the medical side on the benefits. Now, the outlying years, we need to talk about two different components here. What I'm showing you, these numbers, is an 8% increase in medical for these outlying years, 21, 22, 23. 8% is about what our increase has been averaging, and we have been doing very good to hold the line on that. But I don't think that that's going to end up being a realistic number. That's based on our current past history, 8% increase, okay? You've got multiple things at work. Obviously, this is a health crisis, a health situation. Nobody's going to be able to predict where health insurance rates are going to be a year from now, okay? Maybe they go up, maybe they stay flat. Doubtful. I mean, we've been planning for 10 to 15% increases the last couple of years is what we've been trying to mitigate the last couple of years, and we've been very successful at keeping that about 8%. The other thing that comes out of this 800 line is the retirement contribution that's required by the town of Canandaigua to the state of New York. Everybody knows the stock market is not paying the dividends that it was just a couple of weeks ago. We're already hearing reports of the increases that the comptroller may be looking from the municipalities for the retirement contributions. We could likely see a near $40,000, $50,000 increase in our retirement contribution between the general fund and the highway fund combined. This number may mean that we may need to tack on an extra $20,000 or so. Now,
Hey,
there's a
Doug,
little bit of good news. Yes.
that contribution, what point in the year is it made? Are we at risk for this year's number to be higher because the contribution gets made at the end of the year? That's what I'm trying to gauge, because I feel like our most urgent need is to figure out what's going on with this year, and is there any risk relative to retirement for this year?
Sam or Kate, do you want to, Sam, do you want to jump in on that?
Sorry, the baby's crying. But I believe we already made the payment for this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is no risk to this year's budget, but what
Yeah.
Doug is saying is that there could be a potential big impact next year.
Yeah,
Kate, do you know if we've already made that payment? I know we prepay at the end of, we prepaid in November last year for this year.
Correct. So it comes out of the budget at the end of December for the year coming up. So in December of 2019, we paid for 2020.
Oh, then
And
we have a big risk coming up
so-
at the end of the year.
Yes, but by paying in December for the year ahead, we receive a discount. There's a discounted rate on the invoice from what we would owe if we waited till January.
Right, but it's the potential for the end of the year for them to have a more clear picture and demand a bigger payment for next year. And then we would have to make the decision which year we make the payment in.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, yeah. What amount do we have budgeted for that payment this year? Does anyone know?
Could one of you look that up for me real quick on the budget? The other thing is we've got some good news regarding that. The town of Canandaigua, about whatever it was, sometime within the last 10 years, created a retirement contribution reserve fund. There is over $500,000 sitting in that fund that can only be used for those retirement contributions. So the good news is, even if we take a hit this year, that is finally a vehicle that we can pull some money out of that reserve fund that otherwise has just been sitting there collecting interest and collecting a lot of interest that otherwise we can't do anything with it. So yes, it's not good news, but we have that money sitting there.
It mitigates the risk.
Right.
There was $125,000 budgeted for retirement in the highway fund in 2020.
Thanks. But again, looking at those out years, an increase in medical, increase in retirement benefits, all that stuff, that number, this number, 469, 506, 547, that may be very light based on the current staffing. So we may have to look at that. And I think that, and you're going to see this when we get to the general fund also, I also think we're going to have to take a hard look at our health insurance offerings. We probably are going to need to revisit whether or not we offer the gold plan. I'm just going to put it out there. The gold plan costs the town of Canandaigua over $20,000 per employee that's on it. We probably need to look at eliminating that plan and shifting completely over to the high deductible plans. All right, any questions on that? That's not stuff we have to decide right now, obviously, but it is something we need to be aware of. All right, so that is the highway fund. That $1 million reduction essentially there balances out revenue and expenses, $2.9 million. No furloughs in the highway department, reduces capital expenses, reduces contractual expenses. And while we may have that situation regarding retirement, we have the reserve fund that'll get us by this year for that. And we just need to be thinking ahead. So, all right, if there's anything on highway at all, and then we'll go over to the general fund. Okay. So the highway fund was the easy one, and we've already been an hour here. So I'll see if I can go through a little quicker here. The general fund, a little bit more complex. Similar setup here, adopted budget, this column here, the proposal for any changes relative to the situation budget amendments, and then the outline years. And again, I'm just going to scroll down here to the bottom and just show you that what I'm showing you here is that the tax rate can be held steady based on these numbers at $1.03, but it doesn't give us much wiggle room. All right.
Doug, I want to make a comment here as a non-town board member, as a citizen. I think the heroics to get to the $1.03, back to the $1.03, by the effort of the board is tremendous. It's also interesting. I would encourage the board to have a debate amongst themselves to determine the receptiveness of a tax increase in the out years, because as Terry just said a few minutes ago, you can never compromise safety. And I know no town board member ever would, but that's real, and we got to make sure that we have. So my comment really is $1.03 solid for this year and 3 more years? My answer would be, as a citizen, I don't think the citizens are going to hold the town to, if they come off that 103 to a different number. I'm not saying go to $1.50, but there'll be some reasonableness as long as that story is told correctly by the town board to the public that you achieved the target for 2020. You're unable to forecast 21, 22, 23, but the board needs to have a consensus around where they want to take that $1.03 and what the impact of taking that $1.03 up is as it looks across the board of revenue requirements for the town. So I'll just stop there.
If I could just jump in, that's always going to be a possibility, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen with real estate values on top of it. So it's always a hope. People are going to be hurting. And like you're saying, of course, for this year, people don't have the income. So we can't hit them when they're down. And I appreciate, Doug, everything that you're trying to do, realizing that we're all hurting in this together in terms of what we're taking in as families. But they outline years, things get better in terms of incomes. We're going to have to think of, again, as you said, taking safety into account. How can we stop the gap? And sometimes we have to make those difficult decisions. So I appreciate you saying that. I feel that way, but I hope that others know that that's always something we're trying to do.
Right. And the most important part of that, Kathy, from my view, is getting out with the 2020 modifications with a full story. And then you have won back the hearts and the investors in the town, right?
Right.
Yeah. I agree completely with what you said, Greg. I think that's well stated. I think that the emphasis on $1.03, not emphasis, but the using that $1.03 and then, working back through the system really is just to demonstrate what we would have to do in order to maintain that. And I agree. It may very well be not realistic at all, to use that as a goal, maybe an aspirational goal, but not an operational goal.
Right.
And I think one of the things that people have to realize, and you can see it right on the screen there, our tax levy in just the general fund, but it's similar in the highway fund, is $555. The sales tax that comes in is 4 times that number. So to make up for sales tax, our tax levy would have to go up four times to 5 times what the number is. You know what I mean? So you have to realize that our tax levy is the smallest piece of the puzzle, the way we have been going forward, and could end up being called upon to be a bigger piece if stuff doesn't happen the way it has happened.
Yeah. And also the tax rate is also driven by, that denominator, our gross assessed value, and who knows what that's going to do, whether that takes a hit or what,
So that's what I'm going to show you here in a second. So keep in mind the tax levy, for every $10,000 that you spend, it's a penny on the tax rate. Okay. So if we increase the tax rate to $1.08, that's going to get you additional $50,000 essentially. That's not going to pave a road. But anyway, it's just a factor. So assessed value, our current townwide taxable assessed value is 1.377756543. That's this number right here. Okay. What I'm showing you here, and this factors into the corresponding numbers up above with the tax levy. You can see the formula right there in the subject bar there. This is showing a 1% increase. In the past, we have showed a 2% increase in that assessed value. I have had a number of conversations with our town assessor, with others. I can also tell you currently I'm following about 50 homes, give or take, on Zillow, watching the prices of them. I can tell you that I'm seeing price cuts, $15,000, $25,000, $35,000. We know that Greg had done some research for us. There were 101 homes sold in Ontario County in February. There were 16 sold in March. I forwarded you the email that I got from Andy Griffith when I checked in with him. The real estate market right now is a big question, as Terry said. But what I'm showing you here is a conservative increase in the assessed value of 1%, which again helps to keep that tax rate at 103 and the corresponding tax levy amount up above. So for 2020, the tax levy of $555,000, we've already received that, just like the highway fund. And again, this keeps the tax rate, excuse me, at the $1.03. In the outline years, 565, 585, 615, based on those 1% increases in the assessed value. All right. Pilots will remain very consistent unless there is a request to renegotiate it, because the 2 pilots that we're getting have contracts that extend out the year. So I'm showing the full amount there for the pilots. Penalty on taxes, we've been very consistent over the years, just about that same number there. So just leaving that flat. Here's the big question, sales tax. This is what Linda was alluding to. We had budgeted for 2020, $2 million in sales tax revenue for the general fund. What I'm showing you here is 65% of that. Again, a 35% loss, $700,000 loss in that sales tax calculation there. Outline years, just like highway, 75%, 85%, and 95% to get up there. Again, just like we talked about before, all those variables that, we talk about, the mall, the car dealerships, nobody's selling anything, sales tax. We'll have a better idea, hopefully a month from now, on what the first quarter might look like, but, it's going to take a little bit of time there. Mortgage tax, alluded to the same exact thing. 65% of our budgeted amount, we have budgeted $230,000 in mortgage tax. 65% for the mortgage tax revenue, you've got 75, 85, and 95%. Now, mortgage tax is interesting. I have had conflicting information from some of the sources that I've checked with. Some have said, oh, we think that number will still be strong because people are going to refi there because the interest rates are going to drop. Well, the interest rates haven't really dropped that much yet. And if you've got people that are unemployed or underemployed, they may not qualify for doing a refinance. So again, I know it's a conservative approach, but that's why you guys asked me to do this stuff. It's a conservative approach. I'm showing you a loss in mortgage tax revenue. And again, if there's extra money that comes in, great, but I'd rather plan for not having it at this point.
Doug, another interesting number to check on the mortgage tax would be the forbearance rate in Ontario County and the town of Canandaigua from the local lending institutions. That would give you an indication of whether people are going to refinance. And I agree with your statement that it's relatively flat. It's been flat since late last year. Through this year has been, maybe a quarter of a point, move of 250 basis points, but that's it. So I would say that there may be further deterioration beyond that 149.5. That's all I'll say.
Yep. That's great. Anything else on mortgage tax?
No.
Okay. Cable franchise fees, these are the fees that we get from Spectrum now, Charter Communications. They've been relatively flat. There might be a slight uptick as more people are staying home. They're not going to the movies. They're not out. People may buy and call and get cable, possibly. But again, I'm showing a relatively flat number here.
On that one, you got to consider that the real solution there is the people like Netflix, and there's a whole different relationship with that cable franchise tax as a result.
Right, absolutely.
I think that's going to deteriorate, is my opinion.
Parks and Rec fees. Now, this is the amount. All right, Sam or Kate, I'm probably going to mess this up. This one, I think, is the $1,000 fee, correct? That we collect for new construction? No? Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, because we have 2 places where we have rental income from Parks and Recs, but I believe this is the $1,000 fee that we collect for subdivision new constructions. Obviously, construction can't even happen right now under the governor's order. So showing a significant, 50% hit there. Then after it comes back, relative to the same comments relative to mortgage tax, we don't know how many people are going to be building a new house or subdividing, right? It's going to take a while for that revenue line to come back to what it was. We've got zoning fees here. Again, taking a big hit, the development office with the governor's order, the number of applications. Eric, are you still on the line? Can you what are we seeing in terms of new applications right now?
Really didn't slow down much this month. I think we had 7 or 8 applications this month. It might be that those ones were kind of in the queue already last month before this whole thing hit, and maybe we'll see more of a slowdown into May. But this month wasn't any slower as far as zoning and planning applications.
Okay, thanks. So on erosion control, again, that's relative to new construction. That's, you know, that's not a big number there anyway. The contracts that we have with both the city of Canandaigua and the town of Bristol relative to the transfer station and then Bristol code enforcement, just showing those to remain relatively flat. Maybe there'll be a small uptick in those in the out years. Interest income, you know, actually we've been doing okay with interest income, relatively speaking, with New York class. That's probably going to take a hit here in the out years, but I think we'll be okay for 2020 at that $15,000, and then we'll have to relook at that.
Yeah, I think we underestimated it for 2020. So even with the lower rates going forward, I feel like we're going to be in better shape than we could be.
Right. The rental of real property, this is actually relative to a house that we rent out. So looking for that to remain relatively flat. Town clerk fees remain fairly flat. Dog licenses, you know, who knows if everybody's getting rid of getting tired of their dog being home all the time, you know, that may take a hit, who knows, or maybe an increase. Site development fees, you've got a reduction is what I'm showing you here, again, relative to the new construction. Construction debris, you know, Jim, I mean, you want to touch on that? I mean, that's the one thing that we have experienced is a lot of trash over the last couple of weeks. Everybody being home, they've brought their trash to us. So
Yeah, we definitely brought in a lot of solid waste the past couple weekends with people being off. I don't know exactly what it'll do to our cost, either through the disposal of municipal solid waste, because it's going to cost us more this year, or if it'll flatten out, I hope shortly, because people are definitely cleaning their houses out.
Recycling revenue, flat. A lot of these flat. Sale of equipment, and these aren't big numbers anyway, flat. Court fines, flat. Court fines, I did have a conversation with Judge Prell earlier this week. What he tells me is he thinks that the fine amounts will remain relatively steady for what we have budgeted. He thinks it's just going to come later in the year. We're not going to have the revenue here that we would normally have spread over, you know, a full 12 months. Obviously, with them being down essentially for 30, 45 days now, and that may be extended longer. By the time the court case is processed and that sort of thing. He thinks the money will still be there. It'll just come a little bit later. Planning grants, $45,000. These are specific. They've already been earmarked. We've received some of this money already. We're being told that a lot of these grants, that the money's still coming in. We need to have a conversation relative to that, to another grant here, I think, at the end of this. But then looking in the out years, I think that that's going to take a hit because I also, from a planning grant side of things, I think we need to, you know, refocus our priorities back to the comment that was made earlier. You know, there's a lot of quality of life issues that we've enjoyed, and it really relates to this next line here too, for the transfer of the Parks Fund. There's a lot of things that we've been doing. We've been gung-ho moving forward on quality of life type issues that I think one of the things that this is going to force us to do is kind of reset, focus on some of the safety aspects. And we may not be able to do everything that we were previously doing, or it may have to slow down for a while here until we figure out what the new normal is. And I know that that's shared by a number of the other municipalities around us. I've had similar conversations. I'll share with you, Jack Marin told me, Jack Marin is, you know, as the chairman of the board of supervisors and the Victortown supervisor. What he said to me is that they have a finance meeting today and they're doing this exact same thing. And he said their parks and recreation program, they have a very robust parks and recreation program. They spend in excess of $1 million a year on it. And he said to me that that's a quality of life. that they're probably not going to be able to do for a while. And I know that they're looking at major cuts in that program for Victor. So again, these, you know, we just might not be able to be as gung-ho in moving forward with some of these projects as what we wanted. What I'm showing here is the $180,000 transfer from the Parks Fund. That's money that, you know, is already in the Parks Fund relative to certain expenditures that we can do. There's a specific expenditure line for that, but I'm also showing you no transfer for the coming years because I think we're going to take a hit for a while here with new construction. That's where that money comes from, that new construction, and without the money coming in, it's going to be hard to regenerate that. So I see a text message from Linda that says she got bumped off and she is having trouble rejoining. So hopefully she'll be able to jump back on here in a second.
I also just got a message on my sites that the 6.6 million people applied for unemployment week ending April 4th. Just announced a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge number of people that are filing for unemployment. Now, there are two appropriations here that I have added in terms of revenue. I just want to draw your attention to help balance this out. The general fund, you know, in my email to the town board, I referred to it as the big ugly because there's a lot of detail that we need to talk about on the expenditure side of things. But just to help balance out the revenue and expenses, and we haven't even talked yet about all the expenses I'm going to show you that I'm proposing to cut, cutting out nearly, what, $800,000 out of this fund. That also still takes into account transferring in $75,000 from our tax reserve fund. We may not need it. We might be able to, again, if we can keep expenses low or use fund balance. With those types of reserve transfers, we don't do until the end of the year. But I'm just showing you that we might need to do that. And the same, we created 2 years ago a new reserve fund called the Bonded Indebtedness Reserve relative to the highway building. Again, I'm showing you we might need to pull a little bit of money out of that. That currently has, I think, $300,000 in it, doesn't it, Kate? And that just shows using some money there for principal and interest payment.
Before you go to expenditures for the town board question again, where is the rentals of the cabins at Ananda?
That's in the A2001 category that we had that question on. It's 2110, that's the zoning fees, and then 2001 is cabin rentals.
So it is the cabin rentals, okay. All right, so that's this line here.
So that one. So my question is, you know, one thing I would ask the town board to consider, speaking on behalf of a number of citizens on this one, and that is that when we do come back, you know, we need to make sure that we take care of our own, and by that I mean we may want to forego. The town board may be forced to keep the cabins locked, as an example. We don't know that yet, right? But we ought to open up the parks as best we can. Every day is important to those people to be able to enjoy the parks, and some of them are still enjoying them, walking through them and doing other things what they're allowed to do today. But I would recommend that we don't charge any citizen, I don't know if it's legal or not, anybody from the town of Canandaigua, if they want to get away for a weekend or a midweek break and the cabins do open up at Ananda, I would suggest it might be worth the whatever we get per day, $30 or $50 a day forgiveness, allow them to enjoy the community that they've been supportive of. So I'll stop there.
Interesting point. Yeah. Is this really Greg?
I was going to say the same thing.
Here, you got to win their hearts first. We have to win the hearts.
No, I think that's very worthy of consideration, Greg, really.
I don't think so.
Okay. Just moving on here with revenue. So then the appropriation to fund balance, you know, we had budgeted and we've already moved. We have two lines in the general fund. One is unassigned fund balance and one is appropriated fund balance. Today, we have already taken $491,000 as of 1/1/20 and we appropriated that to balance the 2020 budget. So that $491,000 is already spoken for. That's already there. It's easy to do in our new system, right, Kate, versus the old system. Additionally, there's about $1 million in unassigned fund balance sitting there in the general fund if we have to tap into it. So I'm very, very confident in that 491 number. That number is already there. Adding $8,000 to balance the budget, it's immaterial. Then the $450,000 in years going forward, again, if we can keep these expenses, welcome back, Linda. If we can keep these expenses down and we have some extra money, hopefully at the end of the year, the last couple of years we've appropriated, in addition to not having to use the appropriated fund balance, we haven't had to use. Additionally, we've been able to appropriate $200,000 and $300,000 at the end of the year to reserve funds. So we've been really strong financially the last couple of years. So again, I think these numbers, 499, 450, these are very solid numbers. I think we'll be in good shape with this. And moving forward there on the revenue side of things. All right. On the expense side of things, you can see that what I'm showing you here is a balanced budget again, $3.2 million, down from $4.0 million. And there's a lot to talk about in this, in the details. So your timing is perfect, Linda. What I'd like to do here is start with the 200 lines, just like what we did in highway. And we'll come back line by line to the various things. So just jumping over here for a quick second. So our budgeted amount, 462,530 in capital, 462,530. And then what I'm showing you here is reductions to get it down to 311. So we had, and I'm just going to go line by line here, and anybody from any of these departments jump in and help me out as we go here. But first line in my office, we had some equipment, some computers and stuff that we were going to purchase. Obviously holding off on anything like that. The next line, there was a scanner we were going to buy in the town clerk's office. And just so everybody again is aware, just like in the highway fund, what I'm showing is the budgeted amounts that I'm taking back out here. Scanner in the town clerk's office, holding off on that. Improvements that we were going to make to the town hall was a number of different improvements that we had talked about. Reducing that line by $25,000 and holding off on that. Reducing expenses and data. There were a variety of new things that we were going to look to do on the new computers and just new software, even new software for the development office, holding off on all that.
Doug, does that include, does that
Yep.
15,000?
Does not include integrated, no.
No. Does it, Tyler's already spent quite a bit of money on new computers. Does that take into that account?
It does take that into account. Yeah,
All right.
we're good there. The next line, we had planned to spend about the A3320 line is the general line. The 200 line is where we put money for like the gateway signs, as well as any improvements or traffic control devices relative to the 200 line. That is not road striping. That is a different line. A reduction of 20,000 there in A3320 200. So that means, we currently have a project team, and this is where I'm talking about some changes relative to the things that we would like to do and the quality of life things. It would mean us not doing those gateway signs that we had been talking about doing. The next line, 7110-200 parks capital improvements. We had budgeted. This is a $80,000 reduction. This is things like, for instance, the roof at King Hall that we were going to do, not doing that. The roofs of the bathrooms there that we were going to do, not doing those. And then these last two are small amounts, recycling equipment and code enforcement, $5,000 and $2,000 respectively. This is the general fund is tough, and so what I'm trying to do is find literally every $1,000 that I can find from every line to help get these numbers down, but that takes it from the 462 down to 311 on that. Additionally, on the out years here, again, just showing the same thing, 200, 333, 495, there's not going to be a lot of money keeping this tax rate, approximately $1.03 to spend on capital improvements. And again, the general fund and the highway fund relative to capital equipment, capital improvements, it does matter. So if we reduce for 2020 the capital equipment to 0 in the general fund and add that 200,000 to the highway fund, that's something that we can do and still remain at that tax rate. Any questions on that?
One text message that I got when I was having the connection trouble was from Kevin, and he's listening, and he can't unmute himself, I guess. And he said, in other situations, they've had, sometimes stimulus has looked for shovel-ready projects to throw some money at to get the economy jump-started. And so I think we're pretty fortunate that we ultimately have a bunch of shovel-ready projects. We've got the Town Line Road, we've got the water project, we've got a bunch of things like that where if they do something like they have in the past, we might be able to benefit from that.
Right. Well, Linda, that goes back to the comment that we had made earlier too. I mean, they're talking about maybe a phase 4 stimulus, but we don't want to budget for it.
No, we can't budget for it, but I was just saying it could be a bright spot for us.
Right. Yeah. A number of these budget lines, for instance, like 71,200, I think we had, there was $98,000 adopted is what the budget amount was adopted. And then, so taking 80,000 out of it, yes, it reduces it significantly, but it does leave a little bit in there for things that we have to do. And I know Troy had sent me a message too, and we'll have to talk about that roof, but some of these, what I'm proposing to do is also, and we're going to get into this in a second, I'm proposing to cancel contracts that we already have, as well as in some cases, if we've bought materials, return it. So anything else on the capital? Sorry,
Do you know what you're cutting yet, or is that still in the process of figuring out what you're going to be cutting?
We'll have to go line by line for that.
Okay.
That 200 line. So have to go into that. On the contractual side of things, the budgeted amount is 1.2 million. And I'm just going to show you that here. 1.2 million is the total amount here. And what I'm showing you is quite a few cuts. We'll go line by line through them to bring this total down to $830,000. Now, again, the rationale here is there's limited revenue coming in. First thing that I was trying to cut was equipment. Second thing I'm trying to cut is contractual, so I can preserve as many of the employees as possible. But I'm going to tell you right now, I can't do that either. I can't preserve all the employees. So as we go down through here, these are difficult decisions, and I know nobody wants to face. It's not a great situation, but we've got to look here at the revenue lines and see what we can do. And that's why I'm taking such a hard whack at both capital and contractual lines. So the very first line is the town board line for contractual. And I wish I had put the budgeted amount in here because I know it's more than the $500, but taking $500 out of that. I know we've had a little bit of money left in the past. In terms of, maybe we don't do as many local laws, again, reprioritizing our efforts, maybe instead of, always being so aggressive on the things that we do in terms of moving things forward, we may have to slow down here a little bit. Another big expense relative to the local laws is when we codify those with general code, those get rather expensive. And so, we may just have to think, smartly about those as we move forward. Kate, were you gonna?
Yeah, 1010.4 was originally $750, so that still leaves about $250. I know we've had a few expenses even already this year for a few postings and things like that. the annual subscription for the newspaper, but certainly reasonable.
Right, okay. The next line is specific to the town manager's office, but it pertains to all departments. Eliminate all training, all conferences, all canceled until further notice. For every department, all training, everything canceled. In terms of off-site, we'll do on-site training. We have experts that we can bring in, the little no cost, but no conferences, no nothing. And so,
And I think in that regard, we probably will have a lot of towns chipping in with each other, experts around, something that we definitely can look at, you know, sharing town to town. Someone might be an expert in law, for example, and someone else might be an expert in any other thing. So I think that's something we definitely can work on.
yep, thank you.
Doug?
Eric, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, the planning, zoning, and ECB boards are, they're required to have the training. That includes them as well.
Well, we would not send them to any conferences. We would do it internally.
Okay.
Okay, so the next line, reduce purchasing contractual by $1,500. Some of these, what I've gone through is just trying to tighten these up here a little bit. It still leaves money in these accounts, but really tries to tighten it up versus what the budgeted versus past expenditures, past actual revenue or expenses have been, and also looking to, we have to rethink the way that we spend money. And as part of that, at some point, we're going to have a conversation, probably the finance committee, and then ultimately the town board, about our procurement policy. I think we're going to have to revisit our procurement policy in light of the current situation.
Right, it's likely in the short term that we'll want to reduce the limits of personal approval so that everything is given a really good scrub, I think, is the right way to handle it.
Yeah. The next line here, reducing assessor contractual. Most everybody knows our Chris Lyon left and went to work for Penfield. We have appointed Pam Post as our provisional assessor. We do have, again, this is more relative to conference and trainings, so canceling that. We still do have some training that we need to do with Pam, but you'll also see on the personnel side, what I'm proposing is that we not backfill Pam's position. The next line here, 1410-400, again, eliminating training. All of our training costs. I think that's the town clerk, right, Jean? I think that's your line
That's
here
correct, yep.
for conference.
But there's already been expenditures in training this year, so.
Yep. The next line here is attorney usage. Again, both the next two lines, attorney and engineering, as much as possible, trying to eliminate those costs for the town. Do as much of that internally as we can. Additionally, Eric and I have had conversations, as well as Chris Jensen. I just want to share with you what we're trying to do is use Chris Jensen as much as possible for the Troy. I think we might be picking up some noise. If you wouldn't mind just muting yourself there. If we just trying to use Chris Jensen for the review of our traditional single family homes, new construction type things, so that we're not passing along so many chargebacks to our residents, and trying to reduce those engineering costs as much as possible. This specifically 1440 is the town's engineering line, as well as the next line. We had budgeted $7,500 for planning sewer at Cheshire. This eliminates that also. So you've got about $21,000 between these three lines. These are general lines. We'll talk about planning in a second.
Doug, just a quick question on that.
Yep.
The total contractual engineering relationship is with just MRB or some other people?
That is predominantly MRB. Is that?
And what is the number today that we had forecasted in the 2020 original budget to spend in all categories with MRB?
Kate, can you pull up that? Did you have that open by any chance, that 1440?
That original line that actually Doug's calling for the elimination of the full line, 3,500 is what was budgeted in 1440, 400. That's the full amount.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
There are some additional projects that will be done with MRB, but those are in other funds.
Right, so I don't think we have the answer to your question, Greg.
Right,
It's
right.
what is all the spending with MRB by,
I think the town board would be well served to completely understand that number and what opportunities that might exist.
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah,
I mean,
is.
yes, it's related. It relates, but it's not specific to these budget lines.
Right.
Because we can look at that separately.
Yeah, park it for now. That's fine.
Yeah. Records management line, Gene, $9,000. And I'm sorry, I just need to cough here for a quick second. Gene, do you want to make any comments on this?
We were able to reduce some. A lot of that is depending on local laws. There was $1,600 or $6,500 budgeted. It looks like we're going to be not adopting as many local laws this year. We did the local law number 1 at the last meeting. But a lot of things one of the things like our shredding services, instead of them coming every 4 weeks, we're trying to minimize.
Thanks, Gene. The next line is our communication line. This is where we put money for sending out things like a paper mail piece. And Kate, would you mind just telling me what the total amount was for that line? It's $1,480,400.
That was originally 6,250, 6,250.
Yeah, so it essentially eliminates that entire line. Just saves a little bit of money for a little bit of something if something comes up, but that means we would be digital communication, not paper communication.
Yeah, the amount that remains, Doug, is actually the 250 is the MailChimp annual subscription. So in order to be able to keep using MailChimp, but otherwise there'd be nothing additional.
All right, cuts the full thing. Thank you.
And we are seeing more people that are seeing our digital social media outputs every month. There's more and more people. I think we're close to 1,200 people who have signed up on MailChimp already. So that it is increasing every day. We get a thing saying 2 or 3 people have signed up for MailChimp, which is fantastic. So.
These next 3 lines, these are the contractual lines that we created, I think it was 2 years ago, so that we could monitor specifically the electric and the utility costs for the town hall, the highway building, and then our parks. I'm showing a reduction here. Obviously, we don't have as many people in our buildings, and parks are pretty much closed, not knowing how long exactly that's going to be. I think we had a little bit of money left in each of these lines last year. Not a lot, but a little bit. So just showing some reductions here. And we may have to, as there was a comment earlier, we may have to think, and specifically in terms of parks, some of those cabins may have to be closed up for a while, if they reopen this summer. This next line, 1670-400. This is another line specifically for mailings. Postage, I think, comes out of this, and a variety of other things. I'm sorry, Kate.
Lots of copy paper.
Yeah. Again, some of this is, and I think I've talked with some of you about this. I do think once this is over, there's going to be a change in the way not only the town of Canandaigua operates, a lot of municipalities and a lot of businesses around the world. And I think we need to be mindful of using digital communication as much as possible. If we can get away from mailing and printing costs, I think we need to look at that. We certainly have been using a lot less paper in the last 30 days. I know even in our office, we've been emailing everything back and forth. So, data processing. Sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Doug. Gene, on the 1670-400, I know that we do our bulk mailing from the water through postage, and then it gets reimbursed, right? from water to the general fund?
Yes, that's
So-
correct, Jim.
Okay, all right. I mean, obviously we would hit it every quarter, but it should be replenished back from water. So just make everybody aware of that.
Correct. Yep, there's a transfer over from that. And I think, let's see, I was just trying to look at that number here. Is what, $28,000, Kate, I think is what we had budgeted in that line, which was a 5% reduction at that point. So, data processing, 1680,400 in the elimination of some programs. I just want to jump over here to 1680,400 in the budget for a quick second, and I'm going to share this screen with everyone. Let's see here. Okay. So you should be able to see that screen now. So that 1680,400. Here's all the things that are in that line. There's a lot in that line. There's what, over $100,000 it looks like. I'm sorry, whoops. I'll go back, not quite $100,000. My screen is cut off there. The $110,000. You've got USA Payroll. USA Payroll does our pay stubs and all of the processing for that. So you've got 8,000 there. Technology license for Tyler Technologies. You've got some telephone system as well as upgrades, software, offsite backups. You've got some new computers in here. You've got support for integrated. You've got email hosting. You've got security. You've got Adobe subscriptions, and a whole lot of miscellaneous stuff gets dumped into this 1680,400 line. We know that we're going to need another block of 100 hours from integrated in the short term. That's $7,500. They charge us $75 an hour for the use of 100 hours of their time. And we've shopped that repeatedly, and that is a very competitive rate. It's hard to get technology help for under 100 hours an hour. So this takes a bite out of that line of $15,000, and essentially what I think that looks like is a combination of lines where we trim them up, but look at eliminating some of probably half of that. We eliminate one of the $7,500 that we were budgeted for Tyler Technologies, if at all possible, and then look at maybe holding off on some of the other software. The next line down is our insurance. We actually have good news on that. $15,000 reduction in there. The insurance came in a little bit less than what we had budgeted. The next line down is
Doug, on that one?
Sure. Yep.
I have a comment on that. From a private business perspective, insurance rates are changing every day because the vehicles are not being used. There's a whole different model out here now, and I would encourage the town to take a look at any consideration they may get for not running a vehicle or not running a building or parks or whatever. There needs to be some rebate driven back to that should be requested of the insurance company coverage. And there's a force majeure conversation occurring too, which I'm not going to comment on yet, but I think there's room to collect. While it's great that it's less than budgeted, but the budget should still, the amount outflow should have come down also because of lack of usage. And insurance companies are obligated to return that to the policyholders.
Okay, thank you. That's something we can look at. The other thing is we also get money from Canandaigua Consolidated for their portion of the insurance too. So there'll be plenty of money in that line, but that's a good point, Greg. We have $100,000 in contingency. This line, 1990,400. This does take a $50,000 whack at the contingency line, reduces it by half. The next one, what I'm proposing to do is pay for the services received to date. And Kathy, obviously, this is some of the stuff we're going to have to work on it a little bit, even from a legal perspective, but this would end our enhanced law enforcement contract with the Ontario County Sheriff's Department.
They're not doing any right now anyway, just so you know.
Yep.
So we can talk to them sooner rather than later about that.
Okay. This next line, reducing road striping. Jim, you and I have talked a little bit about this by 40,000. You want to touch on this?
Yeah, my thought here would be to review the roads. Maybe not every road needs to be striped. Some can be maybe just a center line, not the fog line, to try and reduce our cost on road striping.
Again, on that one, for me, from a citizen's perspective, safety is job one, and I know road striping does help driver safety for sure.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any chance of getting a reduction in, the cost of doing it? I mean, everybody's going to be looking at cutting expenses, so.
Terry, to answer that question, we have to go through Ontario County because they did the bid for us that we piggyback off of. And they would have to go to the vendor and see, but I will probably guess no.
Well, the county should be encouraged to be looking at expenses also.
Right. I think a large part of it is the labor is set by prevailing wages. So that's not going to change. The only thing that might change would be the glass beads and the paint itself.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, that budget line had $91,000 in it. There was $41,883 for road striping fog lines at 221 miles. So that's $40,000. Again, we want everybody to be safe, but do all 221 miles have new fog lines put on them. That also included $34,000 for road striping. It also included $15,577 for road signs, symbols, etc. So again, do all the signs have to be replaced? Can we, tighten things up by eliminating out of a $91,000 budget, eliminating $40,000 out of it? So the next line here is reducing streetlight repairs of $17,500. Again, those are predominantly the poles on 332, as I think is what comes out of this. And there's a couple of other lights that come out of this general fund. But not doing some of that work. Jim, did you have anything on that?
Only thing we'll do is we'll try and, like, instead of one bulb that goes out on 332, we might wait for them to have a couple bulbs go out and do one trip instead of 3 trips. When they come out, I'm sure we'll get people concerned with lights being out on 332 and the intersection lights. But the intersection lights, we borrow the East Bloomfield bucket truck to go out and do the work on those lights. So that helps with the cost reducing expenditures there.
Thanks, Jim. And again, it's a recurring theme. I know you've heard me say it multiple times. The same level of service that we've provided in the past, we've got to get back to the basics with some of these cuts in terms of the life safety aspects and some of the things that are more quality of life or aesthetics. We may not be able to fix those as fast as what we've done in the past. We had budgeted some money for parks brochures. Again, this is where it starts to get drastic, especially in parks. Parks and Rec takes a hit under quality of life as opposed to safety. Not printing the brochures, and Sam, you and I will have to relook at that. I know that we'll have some expenses still, but and the next one here is, and again, from a legal perspective, and I started talking to Chris Nadler about this, is canceling our mowing contract that we have for parks. Just so you know where my thought process is on this is, I'd rather keep 2 staff members who, and maybe we can, get by, see how things go, add some part-time seasonal staff, or maybe highway can jump in and help with mowing some of our parks. And, the grass might be a little longer. We may not be able to cut them every single week in all of our parks. But here's an opportunity for us to cut $60,000 that we would have given to a local contractor or otherwise, and keep that back in-house.
Doug, do we still have the mowers?
We do. We have 4 mowers, I believe.
We have 4 zero turns and a wide area mower.
Okay. I didn't know if we had surplus them.
We have the tractor too, so we have quite a few.
Right. Tree landscape reduction. Again, this is relative to new trees and mulch and that type of stuff, reducing that by 4,000. We're planning to make a grant application, taking that back out, not doing that. We had budgeted for 2 movie nights. This would eliminate one of the movie nights, reducing $3,000. Eliminate, so that's on the parks. Actually, let me stop there for a quick second, because that's the parks section. Does anybody have any questions or comments on parks? And then we'll get into planning. No. Okay. Next line here, we start to get into planning, the 8,000s. Again, eliminating the training, the conferences. 80-2400. This is a large line. Kate, can you tell me how much the total budgeted amount was for that line? I think it was $20-some thousand. 80-2400. This is where legal expenses for Chris Nadler from the planning board, also training goes in there. A variety of things are under that bucket in 80-2400. And this would reduce it by $10,000.
The original budget was $16,350.
Okay, thank you. And then this next line is the planning board's engineering, which I want to say was like $10,000 or $12,000. 80-2410 reduces
8,500.
8,500. Okay, so this reduces that by 6,000 again. So what this is going to mean, and this is some of the things where Eric and Chuck have started having some conversations, and I've had a couple of emails with them too. You know, MRB in the past has done the planning board resolutions. We may need to do that internally. Whether or not we, have the attorney at all the planning board meetings, that's something that has to be looked at. Or whether more of the meetings can be done remotely, or maybe some participation when needed remotely by the attorney or Lance to help reduce some of those expenses. The next lines here, this is still in planning. Planning development takes a hard hit in these budget proposed cuts. Hold off on the comp plan for now, just shelve it. We had to leave some money. Same for open space plan implementation. Just put it on the shelf for right now. Same for implementation of Uptown Phase 2, shelf it for right now. Same for the historical survey that we were going to do, cancel it. Middle Cheshire Road study. And I put $7,500 in here for the Middle Cheshire Road study as us possibly postponing that. We have already paid our portion to GTC on this. We may have to relook at this. And the other thing is that's a grant that GTC is fully administering for us. We may not have any additional costs associated with that, moving that one forward. So we might be able to move forward with that one while we cancel the rest of those. We had also money budgeted for doing a tree inventory survey and applying for a grant for that, canceled. ZBA, this is a reduction in the contractual line relative to the legal fees. Again, trimming that out. This next line, 8140-400, this is the storm sewers. This is our MS4 stuff. We had budgeted $1,500 in case we needed to do anything. We did just have an audit with the DEC. Chris tells me that there's nothing else that we need at this point, so we can go ahead and take that money back out. 8710 is some money that we had put in for the conservation programs, including the team that I was leading, where we were going to look at conservation, subdivision, and all that type of stuff. What I'm proposing is to cancel that. And then finally, eliminating some of the cemetery improvements that we were planning to do.
Doug, just your words here are very important. So do you mean the word cancel, or do you mean the word postpone, or they're identified differently? Cancel.
These are contracts for now, and what I'm saying is that we would cancel these for now, and then we'd start over again if we decide to go down the road when money becomes available.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I know those are difficult. You guys probably have questions on some of that stuff, but again, just flipping back over here, cutting a big chunk of money out of the general fund is difficult. You can see that $830,000 corresponds to the green box right here that I just showed you, that reduced those contractual expenses from 1.2 million to 830,000. The line below that is the debt principal, the $205,000 for the highway building. We don't have a choice in that. We've got to pay that. The line below that is the interest payment for the highway building, the $81,000. Again, we don't have a choice on that. So those are fixed obligations that we have even in the out years, that $286,000 payment.
Doug, a question on those.
Yes.
I've been a big fan of go renegotiate things my whole life. And so is there a possibility on the debt principal, excuse me, the debt interest to go renegotiate that or not? Or is that
No,
gone?
municipal bond is not possible. It's locked in for the full term for that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, we did get a good rate and everything when we did that. Actually, Greg, you were the town supervisor at the time. I think it was what, was it 2% interest? I don't even remember what it was. It was a good, we got a AA2 bond rating.
The goal is always zero, Doug.
I know. I know. So those are, that takes care of our capital, our contractual, our debt, and our debt, the principal and our debt interest. Those are that block there that we've just gone through. Just like I told you with the highway fund, personnel costs directly attribute to benefit costs. There is a direct correlation between the two. And the 800 lines, the benefit, the medical, the retirement is all in that 800, and personnel costs. Again, with limited revenue up above at $3.27 million, have to reduce quite a few expenses to get down to that same balance of $3.278 million. And that does not, just like we talked about earlier, the future retirement contributions potentially going up, potential medical benefits. Plus, I do believe we're going to have to relook at the medical offerings, our benefits that we currently offer. On the personnel side, I am showing some reductions on the personnel side to make this work. I'm not going to get into particular details because those will be need to be held in executive session with the town board. But what I will show you is where I'm coming from on this. So the budgeted amount of $1.4 million was the general fund personnel costs. I am showing, without naming specific names or showing specific account numbers, what I'm showing you are reductions of, I'm just going to count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Furloughing of 6 employees currently paid out of the general fund. Additionally, I referred to this earlier, that's no surprise, the assessor aide not replacing that position. We did have we also had a potential retirement as of the end of March that I am moving forward with as if that person were to retire or be furloughed. We've already moved the highway clerk, and I know Caitlin is with us, over to being paid in part by a grant and being paid by the water department. So there was a little bit of money left in that line. So that reduces that by $4,000. Our intent originally was to hire a part-time highway clerk to help out with that. That would be eliminated. We would not hire that person. Additionally, I'm showing a reduction in park staffing for the year. And I know that this one's going to be controversial after everything we've talked about the last couple of years, but I would propose again to eliminate the gatehouse. And I can almost see your head shaking, Sam. Here we go again in eliminating the gatehouse attendance at Ononda. Also, what I'm showing you is that we cancel the rest of the pay for the planning board, the zoning board, the environmental conservation board. And I'm also proposing that all employees take 1 week of non-paid. That takes the personnel costs from 1.4 million down to 1.3 million. I know that it's not fun. It's not what anybody wants. Nobody wants to be furloughed. Nobody wants to take a week off of pay. But I can also tell you that I have been, I've lost sleep over this, and I have been looking very hard at what other folks are doing. I see businesses where there are mandatory vacation weeks being taken. I know, actually, many of you know Fabiola. They actually cut their salaries by 20%. There's many different businesses right around us. I told you earlier, Randy Farnsworth furloughed all of his sales team 2 weeks ago. The town of Victor, Jack shared with me the specific ones. I'm not going to share them publicly, but they're also looking at furloughs. I can tell you the town of Farmington is looking at reducing all of the hourly employees from 40 hours a week to either 30 or 35 hours a week. This is real, folks. This is real. We've got to get these personnel costs down. There's no other way to really trim up the rest of those expenses up below. That's why I started with capital and contractual lines to get us back to a balanced budget here. So with that, comments, questions?
Well, I'd like to make a comment on the employees from the standpoint of what's best for them. It would be better for them to now be furloughed while there's enhanced benefits for unemployment than it would be for us to find out at the end of the year we don't have enough money and then having a furlough then where there may be no more benefit left. So I feel like it's a hard decision at this point, but it is better for the employee to be able to collect, the benefits that are coming from the feds and the state than it will be later on in the year when they've all run out of money.
If we furlough the employees now, some of these people no doubt are working from home and contributing something, to the overall effort here. How does that work that they are doing get done if they are furloughed?
Yeah, Terry, so the specific ones that I'm talking about, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's what I go back to. We're not going to be able to provide the same level of service. We're not going to be able to, with the fewer employees, we're not going to have the same turnaround time. If something may have to wait a little bit longer. Some of the folks that I'm proposing to furlough, what they can do from home is limited. I can tell you that there's not a department that I'm not looking at least one furlough in every single department. Some departments more than that. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And we're going to, getting back to that other comment, we're going to have to get back to basics with this. There's only so much revenue side of things, and we've got to trim these expenses up.
Doug,
Oh yeah, I understand that, but my point is, are they contributing now, and will something be lost that we need?
Well, something's definitely going to be lost
even
with
in
all
these
of them.
times.
We wouldn't, I mean, Terry, and I'm not trying to be smart, but we wouldn't have them if we didn't need them. I mean, so yes,
Right.
Something's going to be lost. Absolutely. Something is definitely going to be lost. Absolutely. It's not going to be the same level of service as what we currently have. And we're going to have to relook at things, and we're going to have to reprioritize, and we're going to have to make some moves, and we may have to ask people to do some things that they previously haven't done. Absolutely.
and Doug, have you looked at the benefit of maybe like what Farmington is doing and maybe reduce work weeks to like 37.5 hours or even 35 hours and what that savings would be versus furloughing people?
I did. I looked at that, and it just doesn't get us there. And Sam is also, and I kind of talked a little bit about, and I know that I've heard some other municipalities are starting to look at, what a early retirement incentive might look like. The trouble is the same thing, right? And not to be a jerk, but just to talk about numbers. I mean, if we offer early retirement incentives, there's a cost going on for not only this year, but for future years versus furloughs of people that we may or may not bring back. And then the costs are fractional for the town. And it's not to be a jerk, but we have to look out for our residents first and foremost.
And then my other question is, some of these people that are looking to be furloughed, are there options for them to get health insurance elsewhere?
So Sam, do you want to touch on, so they would get a COBRA notification, right?
Well, I don't know much about furlough, but I did look up some things, and Doug, you obviously know more than I do, but everything I read on furlough said that they would still get their benefits. Is that not
Okay.
what the town would do?
Well, we would for now, but then some of them, I think we would, that's only for a certain time period. And then some of them, I think we would actually need to go ahead and lay off.
Okay, so then if they were not covering their health insurance yet, then they would receive a COBRA notification, and they'd get help getting their health insurance through another party.
Well, they could still get it through the town, couldn't they?
Yeah,
COBRA?
but if the town's not contributing, some of it is very, very expensive. So
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I mean, that would be an option.
yeah, they
Granted, it's
could.
expensive, but yeah, yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
keep in mind, going back to that gold plan, I mean, that gold plan, the cost of the town is over $20,000 for a family
Yeah.
on the gold plan. So
Doug, I'm sure you looked at this too, but what about an across the board salary reduction temporarily?
they looked at it also. I've got spreadsheets, all kinds of different things. And the trouble is just getting the number there. I mean, $150,000 on a $1.4 million total personnel line, it's tough. While also still providing some level of service, it's just, it's a difficult situation. It really is.
Oh, absolutely.
We always found in businesses I've been in the past, back when I worked for a living, if going into a situation like this, it's really better to, this week, it's kind of apropos, sacrifice one person to save the others. I mean, if you make everybody go through that pain, it really hurts across the board, whereas a few people, it's not a good thing to do, but very painful. But in this case, as Linda pointed out, with certainly the layoff situation, with the enhanced benefit from the feds, people may be kept whole or even better than whole.
Except for their benefits, but I don't know.
Yeah.
We can, unfortunately, the situation is such that I don't think that there is a solution that keeps everybody whole and keeps everybody happy.
Well, with that extra $600 a week added on to, the normal benefit, there may be enough excess there to help them at least with COBRA payment.
Right, for some time.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we're not necessarily saying that this is gonna, who knows how long it's gonna last. We can't tell at this point.
Right.
How quickly are you looking to possibly take these cuts and everything into effect? Are you looking like May 1st? Are you looking April 15th after the town board meeting, when there can be an official vote? I mean, what's
Yes. So what I am, looking for some direction here today from the finance committee. Technically, the town board can't take any action today because it's the finance committee meeting. But I would hope that the town board would consider these budget amendments at their April meeting, and then we would immediately move forward with the furloughs after that. And obviously, town board will talk about that in executive session, the specifics, but yes, theoretically May 1st.
Or I'm not sure why we would wait to May 1st if we have the town board meeting. I would feel like it would be, we should.
Well, the meeting is what, the 20th?
Yes.
And then we could do it the 21st, I guess, but that's a week. That's 1 week.
We could do it and then the effective May 1st gives people time to make
Correct.
phone calls, figure this, this unemployment
Right.
thing is a nightmare.
Right.
People who have been trying to apply for weeks can't get on. So I think the more time we can give people to prepare, we can vote on it, which, nobody's looking forward to, but it doesn't have to be effective until whatever date.
Yeah, I agree with giving them as much time as possible. when the decision's made. And I'd like to say, Doug, I know I appreciate all the time and effort you've put into this. It's not easy, and we know you put a lot of thought into all of this and trying to protect what we provide and also the taxpayers and everything. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate that.
I do have one other comment on the health benefits. And I've learned this as I'm trying to secure health benefits for my daughter as she repatriates from Beirut, Lebanon, her and her husband. And so I've been working with her a number of days and evenings, or actually early mornings and afternoons. The New York State of Health .gov or whatever the website is, it actually does a very good job of providing coverage at a significantly reduced cost. I'll just put it that way. So much so that my daughter is quite comfortable coming back to the United States. She needs to have insurance on her when her plane lands in the US for personal reasons. And so we've been working through that. And that process is surprisingly, it was shocking to me how thought through it had been, and how the benefits that come to people that go into that process, that she's not going to lose anything from her medical insurance she now has as a resident of Lebanon. So my point is that's worth a fair shake also. And I would advise somebody in the town board or the staff there to take a look at that alternative for the employees that may have to be furloughed.
Good to know.
Thanks, Ray. All right, Linda, that concludes the presentation here from my side of things. If there's something or more questions you guys have.
My thought then is that the next step would be from a financial team, and I want people to speak up if they don't agree, is that we would request that for our meeting, Doug prepare the amended COVID budget for our approval. And then in executive session, we make the hard decisions about any staff impact, and that we also discuss the date of execution in executive session, and then go forward with a plan to try to preserve, preserve the town for the taxpayers as best as we can.
Yeah, the only thing about that, Linda, is we should probably do the executive session before we adopt the budget, but that's just so we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Anybody think differently or want to bring up anything? And I think before we would close this meeting out, I think we should discuss the water project. Right? Or is that something that we need to discuss at the town board meeting? I mean, I think we have quotes from people, and how do we thread the needle with that one right now? It's another big one.
Yeah, it is. Our bid went out, and the bids came back within the budget that was set forth by MRB, the engineering company. We have 3 good contractors that are capable of doing the work. And what it comes down to next is we've had discussions of, will we get the $3 million from the EFC? We received some emails from EFC saying, yes, you will have your money was appropriated in 2019, not 2020. Your funds are here to be used. We all know that we spent 3 years trying to get this project up and running, the importance of it. I've had a couple conversations just with Doug and Linda on, could there be ways to split this up or do something later? It really comes down to cost. If we make this project go out longer or phase it in, because you do part of it this year and you don't do all that was bid out, you probably won't get the contractor to just do what we want done and not the entire thing without rebidding the project itself.
We have to keep, go ahead.
I think everybody knows my opinion. We in my opinion, it's needed for the community as far as providing redundancy, pumps that work, provide proper fire protection, water quality to our water district. And we also know that going forward, if any development is going to occur that hasn't been approved already, won't be approved until we get the water project completed.
We also have to
anything
keep,
add?
yeah, I think we have to keep in mind also why we're doing this project. There's several reasons, but one of the principal reasons is that pump station on West Street, 4 years ago, summer of 2016, when we had that severe drought, we were barely able to keep the tank not full, but operational up on the hill. If something were to occur like that again this year, and if one of those two pumps that we have there, which we have used both of them in tandem during periods of drought, one of those pumps died, there is no replacement. You know, we wouldn't be able to keep the tank full. We'd have to severely curtail water usage. I mean, people would be carrying water from the lake in buckets, you know, for this consolidated district. Also, the points that Jim made regarding the, development and the quality of the water, it's a project that we really have to do. Now, putting it off for another year, you could probably do that, but you probably run the risk of losing that WIA grant in the process. And no doubt if we put it off for some period of time, the cost will go up. You know, this doesn't impact the property tax rate. It hits the O&M on the, water service for those people that are in the consolidated district, you know, which is roughly south of 5 and 20. Myself, I advocate that we go ahead with this project. We have gotten assurances, as Jim said, from EFC through Greg Hoteling at MRB that the money is there and will be there, that they are actively cutting checks for projects that have been approved in the past. I would think that the wise thing to do is to continue on with the project.
Is there a way to do just the part first? Will that impact our grant? Obviously.
No,
I mean, I'm also concerned about, like what Jim said, you know, about in the short term, development can't proceed. In the short term, I'm concerned about our residents getting the water they need and the pump not breaking down. But is this a conversation, a whole separate conversation for another day, or?
We can talk about it all we want. It's just, it's not driven by development needs. It's driven by the need to upgrade that system. The tank up on the hill is 50
No, I know, but
years
Jim
old,
just
and
said that,
you need-
development is held up because of it. That was Jim's words he just said.
Yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
That's just one of the reasons that.
No, I know. I've been there through all the conversations, but I just want people to know that's not necessarily all of our first concerns. Our first concerns is the integrity of our water supply.
Yes, the integrity of our water supply with respect to quality of water that we consume, as well as having a fire flow that is adequate.
Right.
We have no idea what the summer will bring, but if we're faced with a drought situation like we were 4 years ago, and that's what really drove this thing, it wasn't development. The state used development, putting a moratorium on development in order to force us to do something. I mean, that was the hammer that they used. We're not going to, Department of Health said, we're not going to approve any future developments or water district extensions until you do something to improve your supply and quality. So that was really the driver. They just happened to use a development hammer, to try and force us to do something.
I was asking Jim a question about, is it possible to alter the schedule slightly and also to assure or get a commitment from the vendor of the, who we would select, that they would be okay if that $3 million disappears from the state. So what I'm worried about is Andrew Cuomo scooping it back, and then we don't have $3 million coming to us, and we're going to have the whole bill ourselves. And at that point, we might have decided phasing putting in the pump in the line and making sure we can fill the old tank could get us through a year or two more, and then doing the pump at a slightly late, or doing the tank at a slightly later point. So I'm very concerned about the fact that that 3 million, even though we've got some assurance, things are changing so rapidly that concerns me. So what I was suggesting to Jim was we go back to the two lowest bidders and say, hey, here's our situation. You know what's going on here. We may not be able to afford the tank right away. But we plan to do the whole thing. It's just that if something changes like that, we would not be obligated to, we'd be able to make a decision. Is it right? And I understand that, you know, our system needs it, and I definitely want to be able to provide safe water. But I'm wondering if moving the pump station and having the bigger line, even if we had to attach it to an old crappy tank for a little while, could get us some of the way there.
I don't think the vendors really care where the money comes from. If
No.
we were to alter the project, I would think that the WIA money would go away, because it's predicated on that entire project.
Right, right. And I'm not saying we wouldn't do it. I'm not saying we wouldn't. We would have a schedule, but we'd also have an out in our contract with our vendor that said if the WIA money evaporated, we wouldn't be held to do the whole thing.
But that's not how we bid the project.
No.
I know. I understand that.
I think
Could it be rebid?
You would really need to talk to the people that control the WIA money. Would they be willing to extend that period, you know, for an extra year or whatever? You know, the schedule for doing all the work went through, I think, spring or early summer of next year. So the question would be to the WIA people, if we alter the schedule, if we alter the project, is the money still going to be there? I mean, the vendors, you know, I don't think they care where the money comes from as long as it comes to them. And the big thing with the tanks is, yeah, you could probably build the tanks next year instead of this year, but would the money be there, or would we wind up being on the hook for the entire cost? The biggest expense in the whole project is the tanks, of course, as you know.
You know, and right now, we know that our price is what it is right now. A year from now, for them tanks, steel may be short, concrete could be more expensive, labor is going to be more expensive. If I was a contractor, I wouldn't extend my contract a year and try and build those tanks a year from now at the same price. I would say no.
And one way or another, I think the feds are going to get together on some kind of infrastructure bill, phase 4 or 5 or whatever the hell they call it. And that's going to drive demand for, you know, projects in the, you know, next year. So, you know, it's going to become quite competitive. And when it becomes competitive, price goes up.
You know, just for the board's edification, if we were to not do the tank and leave the old one there, we still leave the problem of getting water in and out of that tank. It's still one 8-inch line going in and out. So even though we have pumps that are reliable, if I can't get the water in it or out of it in the way we need it during droughts, it doesn't do us any good.
Well, when I said pumps, you know, I'm not an engineer, but I meant the mechanism by which we get it to the tanks, not just the pumps themselves. I personally, that's.
Just a reminder, we've also purchased all the pipe material that's being delivered for the 16-inch transmission main and the 2 12-inch water mains for the new tanks, I'm sorry. And then we're still, in my opinion, unless Doug tells me otherwise, we will be putting that in this year in preparation of this project. The other thing to think about is most of these pumps and tanks, we're not going to see a bill till sometime August, September. The pumps alone, if we award it in April, are going to be 4 to 6 months before we see them. Before we see a bill for that, and the same with the tank. So you do have some time between now and then to see how the economy will do before we get too concerned on, are we doing the right thing?
Oh, there's no doubt
financially.
that this is the right project. I'm just concerned about the WIA money. That my big concern is that money going to be available for us when we expect it? I don't have any doubt that this is the right thing to do. It's just how to pay for it so that our residents don't see some huge ungodly increase in their water if we can help it.
Well,
I mean-
setting aside the current pandemic and everything, when we agreed to move ahead with this project, we did not know that we were going to get that WIA grant. But we had decided to proceed with the project knowing that we may have to put the entire bill.
I have been told that the WIA grant money, that's set aside for water projects, and the going forward of it will be approved, but, you know, like you said, who knows, but
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like anything else. I mean, all the monies that we were talking about coming from the state and the CHIPS money, the, you know, aid to municipalities, all of that, you know, is, you know, Doug is forecasting a significant drop in those numbers, and the drop could be to zero for all we know at this point in time. I mean, you just don't know what the governor's going to decide to do. That, you know, that budget that was passed,
That's
you
the
know, for
scary
the
part.
next fiscal year is also has a caveat on every single line item that Andy gets to decide who gets the money or doesn't get the money. So the
That's
whole
what-
thing
Well,
is, you know,
Yeah,
gamble.
he can adjust it every quarter. So worst case scenario, what happens if that doesn't, say that WIA grant falls apart, disappears? What worst case scenario with that? I think if I understand what Linda's saying, is that can we proceed in a way to protect ourselves from that if doomsday worst case scenario disappears?
Yeah, let me just talk about the numbers for a quick second, Jared. So the I've done forecasting and I've looked at this. Now, of course, keep in mind, just like the general and the highway fund, the tax rate is based on the assessed value. So assuming, again, a small, like for instance, 1% increase on the assessed value, that starts to tell us, okay, how much money it is per thousand that we would collect on the tax levy. So we have been planning for a number of years now that we knew that with the WIA grant money, that the tax levy was going to be somewhere between like 65, I think it was, and 80 cents a thousand for the residents of the Canandaigua Consolidated Water District. And so we had incrementally been stepping that tax levy up 3 cents per year up to the 60 cents so that there wasn't a huge spike all in one year. That's still on track. And so the debt service payment is what we would be talking about. If we get the WIA money, we would be financing essentially that same $3.5 million that we had for the highway building. So that $289,000 payment that I showed you in the general fund for the highway building, essentially, just for keeping it simple, the Canandaigua Consolidated Water District would have that same debt and principal payment, debt principal and debt interest payment for Canandaigua Consolidated if we were to get the WIA grant money. If we don't get it, then that bond payment is about $480,000, almost $500,000. At that point, you're talking about a 20 cent plus or minus additional tax levy increase. So then you're talking upwards of about $1 a thousand instead of 60 to 8 or 65, 80, whatever it was. You're probably just over $1 per thousand.
Doug, that information that supposedly we can get 0% financing on water projects, is that something you've gotten information on yet?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet. And that's definitely something that we've got to look at because I just haven't seen anything on it.
Yeah, I'll try to see what I can find on it too.
And I think I sent to the town board, I did check with our bond counsel about interest rates for municipal bonds, and there's actually been a slight uptick in the interest rate for municipal bonds. Probably because they figure municipalities are the only ones going to borrow money right now, but who knows?
So
Doug,
I was thinking of it. I've just put it on the agenda, the information. If the town board decides to go through with this, so it's on the agenda, you can either vote on it in April to approve what we have, or there'll be further discussion, but at least it'll be there on your agenda for April.
I think Gary Davis was going to ask a question, I believe.
Yeah, Doug, I appreciate that information because I was just getting ready to call in and, talk to you in regard to what the cost was going to be on it. And I thank you for giving us that information. Is there a deadline that we have to make the determination by in order to still, satisfy the contractors?
I believe, I didn't hear back from Greg. It's either 30 days, which would be like coming up on our April board meeting, or 45 days after we open the bid. So I don't know the exact number of days, but soon.
Yeah, Greg had said that it's typically 30 days, but you can ask for a 15-day extension.
Well, the reason I ask is if there was any way we could find out from the state for sure that we're going to get the WIA grant.
We got the grant awarded already, Gary.
Yeah, I know it's awarded.
Well, the question is whether we get
pandemic.
Question.
Unfortunately, go ahead.
Well, we've gotten word from EFC, from the people, the accountants that send out the checks, and they are saying the money's there. You have to go through all the procedures that you normally would have to, submit for reimbursables, and then we cut a check. I don't know who else you ask, really. I mean, Doug or Greg went to the guy he normally talks to, and that guy's superior. And they both came back with the same thing, saying the money was appropriated, the money's there. You have to submit through the normal paperwork, whatever's, to get, reimbursement. So I don't know who else you ask. I mean, it's a question I have too, and that's why we asked Greg to do that, to try and find out is with as much assurance as possible, that we will be given that money. Now, who knows? I mean, it's you could say there's a certain element of risk there.
Yeah. So
Right. Well, there's no doubt that we need the project to take care of the water problem and the safety of the town and the residents. It's just unfortunate that it hit at the same time this pandemic, unfortunately popped up and, it's thrown a lot of questions and a lot of different things, unfortunately, when we have to, furlough different employees and things like that, which is not ideal by a long shot. So that was my reason I was questioning that thing.
So I think I hear, Terry, that you're saying, hey, we really were thinking of doing this with or without WIA. We were going to just bite the bullet and do that. And then I also heard that Greg Hoteling said it's typical to award contracts within 30 days, and that we might be coming up on a deadline. And I'm wondering, I know in my husband, who happened to be floating around here for a little while, sent me this text message that said in his business, sometimes they cut off funding when they were selling rail cars. And what they would do is they would ask the vendors to have an extension on how long that quote was good for. But I don't know if, one of the things I feel like is starting with the pump and the pipe and everything else would make a lot of sense, even if we couldn't start the whole thing. So that's where I get the sense that if you guys said, hey, we can get our vendor to agree to hold off on our commitment on the tank, but maybe it's a moot issue because we already think that we have to do it no matter what. That's where my head is swirling around on that.
Well, the WIA grant supposedly is there. If you extended the project out and spent the money more slowly, the big question is whether Cuomo's going to grab that money and say, hey, you're not getting any of it. That's a big question. And
that's my concern.
I have no idea how you get that answered. I mean, you could get into this thing and do, I don't know, if you could do the pump station and the put the pipe in the ground and all that, I mean, there are questions of whether that would even work in keeping that tank full, as Jim pointed out. But even with doing that, I mean, there's a significant expense there. Would you get some reimbursement on that? You know, I mean, the whole thing is kind of rolling the dice. I mean, you know, there's a risk in whatever we do. I mean, as I said, we agreed to go forward with the project, not knowing whether we get the WIA grant or not. Doug had put the numbers together and shown us, you know, with and without initially. And, you know, we made all the applications. We missed the first time around. We got a hit the second time. But we had agreed to go ahead with the project. So, yeah, there was no pandemic at that point in time, and we didn't have these other considerations, you know, in front of us. But, you know, all things being equal, I mean, we were going to go ahead with it. Now, as we go out in time, if we do the project and we don't get reimbursement, as we go forward in time, no doubt, real estate prices will stabilize or increase. You know, we'll have more building in the town. So the denominator goes up, and the O&M costs will decrease to the, you know, individual homeowner. I mean, it's, you know, you're talking about, you know, going out over a significant period of time here. So I really believe that, you know, the economy will improve, not instantly. I don't believe it's going to be a V-shaped recovery. I think it'll be more of a U-shaped or maybe a W, you know, up and down for a while. But overall, I really believe that it will improve and that we will, as individual homeowners, be able to afford the project with or without the WIA money. The only way to tell getting the WIA money is submit for reimbursement some invoices. I'd ask Greg if there was any way that we could submit the engineering work and some of the other preliminary work, the surveys, all those things we've done
The
for
materials.
reimbursement. And that involved rewriting the entire plan, which was going to take months to do. And if you rewrite the plan, there's no guarantee that the WIA money would still, that we would still keep that award. So, you know, we had not initially in the what's I can't remember what the plan is. Not an
Utilization
operational
plan.
Yeah, utilization plan, that we had specifically said that those upfront costs were not going to be reimbursable. So in order to try to get some of that money, just to test the system, you know, to see if, you know, a check would be cut, I suggested we try to do that. But Greg came back and said, not really feasible to do that. So right
would
back to
cost us
rolling the
money.
dice. You know, it's a kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, and the other thing I had an idea on was, because everybody is hungry for work and people are really looking for it, was to take those two lowest bidders and say to them, hey, sharpen your pencil a bit and then we're ready to go, and see if we can't get a reduction from them, because of everything has changed since they put their estimate together, and they may be hungry for the work.
Yeah, I don't know the legalities in doing that, you know, the bidding and all. I don't know if you have to rebid or I can't answer that question. But yeah, I mean, sure, you know, you bid $3 million. How about if we give you 2.6? You still willing to do it?
Right.
But I don't know if you have to go back and rebid to all the people that did submit bids. I don't know if you can go to the individual and say, hey, lower your price and you get it. That's a question for Nadler or someone like that.
I know with just even equipment I buy, people will come back later and go, I could beat that. It just puts us in a position of we shouldn't want to be in for moral aspect, take a lower bid from somebody who already bid it. I mean, why take the low two? Take all four. Go back to all of them again. Maybe they come in all lower. I don't know how you go there and say, hey, give me a lower bid.
Yeah,
And they already gave us a bid, and you don't ask the other three who bid on it.
I'm basing it on how they do it for rail cars, and they go and talk to the lowest qualified bidders and see if they can, you know, screw it down a little bit tighter. Because the
I
other
don't
guys
think-
disqualified themselves through high bids in the first place.
I don't think the town needs to be going through a lawsuit from another vendor if we go behind their back and start asking the low bid to go lower.
So
And again,
this is
that,
a citizen's comment for 2 seconds, please. Excuse me. One is Kathy asked Doug to investigate the 0% interest. I think that's really worthwhile to do and get the best answer you can out of that one today or tomorrow. Maybe we'll give Doug until Monday. I'm not sure how long Kathy will give it to him to get that done in. The other one is, I'm not sure of this one at all. I've never done it, but I've heard the stories of people that do, and that is to buy insurance against the award of money. So there are ways to secure, pay, I'm making up a number. Let's say it costs you $300,000 to buy insurance to guarantee a $3 million grant come through. Now, it's normally done in private industry, so I don't know what the public domain, and I'm not sure you can put a lien or action against the state of New York at all, but I would ask us to investigate, because there are times in my life where we have used insurance in a competitive way to get to a better position, and that's all this is about. I think the entire community itself would support this activity, no matter what decision's being made. At the same time, they want to know that every alternative has been pursued and looked at, and there's answers to them. And if you just do the rough difference on a 0% interest for 30 years, I like using 30 years because I'm used to that number, versus a 2.5% or 3%, there's a significant difference on whatever amount of money you choose to borrow. So I encourage some time to be spent to go do that work. I think that work can be done probably by the next board meeting that you guys are having. The other comment is that, Jim, I agree with you. I would never take a single person and go talk to them. If it's going to be rebid, it's rebid to everybody. That's my gut tells me that's the right thing to do. You avoid activities that are what we looked at later on in life when everybody forgets the details of how they got that job. So you got to be transparent with the public and transparent with your bidders throughout the whole process. I also support the rebid though also. I think there is some room, as you know, reality is that the governor shut down construction, right? And so when that construction comes back, the people that were there won't be there. All those people won't be there again. There'll be people that said, oh, I got hit this way personally, or my company got hit this way, we changed the plan. And it's kind of the pause effect. So I would encourage that, we think about that a little bit too, to make sure that we get maximum value for the citizen. And I'll stop there.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we don't know. I mean, the people that were the low bidders, personally, I have no idea how solid they are. I mean, are they going to survive in order to do this project? I mean, that's a good question.
Crane Hogan's been around for about 50 years.
Yeah.
The difference between the first and second place was $1,500.
I thought you said 15,000.
Nope, 1,500.
Oh, wow.
That's it.
Jeez.
That's crazy how close
So-
they are.
So it was pretty tight. So we're all saying
Well,
yes, yay.
Yeah. All right, John.
I'll look a little bit more at that
there's-
0%. Terry, I was just on that 0% interest. We'll look at that a little bit more, but I was just reading some stuff on EFC. It says you have to finance 100% of it. So that leads me to believe that if we get the WIA grant, we don't qualify for the 0%, but let me just double check on it. So.
All right.
So I think this has been a really good discussion. I guess I'm not positive where we are with it. And I think probably we're going to have to make a determination at the board meeting. Is that where everyone else is?
Is that where we would determine proceeding or is rebidding on the table for the four of them, just to say, hey, look, things have changed. We want to make sure everybody's solvent.
And tightening their
something we're looking
pencils.
at? Yeah, I mean, everybody's in a crunch right now. Everybody's hurting. Is that something that we could go forward with a rebid with all four?
Let me ask the cost to do that, because there will be a cost associated to rebid everything.
So
Mhm.
what do you think that like out of pocket for us is like, is it for, that we have to pay Greg's company, or how does that work, the cost? What is
So
the,
we'll have we'll pay MRB to repost it again in the builder's trade. Gene will have to put out another
Public notice.
public in the paper. There'll be MRB's time to whatever we're going to rebid if we're changing the scope of the project. I don't know if we are or not. That's a question. Okay, no, and then and then from there we have to probably open them in June, because there might be more people bidding on them. And then of course we have to take into consideration the duration of getting the material coming later. We'll be dealing with winter concrete, which will be more expensive because we're not gonna be putting tanks up in the fall. We'll be putting them up in the winter. So we have to pay for heated concrete and heated materials. And we might even be paying more in the end, and the bids we had are no good. So there's your other risk.
Absolutely.
When is the date that we, I mean, how much time do we, when were they open? The 26th, was it? March 23rd or?
25th, I believe, Terry.
March what?
26, I believe.
26th. So 30 days, April 26th, but Greg says you got 15 more days. He said usually they'll give you 15 more days if you ask.
Correct.
So
And when
maybe we should check on that and find out if we can do that, just to know.
I'll ask.
when were you looking to break ground on this anyway?
If the town board was awarded in April, it'd take the month of May to probably get all the paperwork done, and we would start in June.
So also just to, as you probably are aware, that if we do proceed, we still have to follow all the protocols of distancing and disinfecting, and we qualify as essential, but you still have to do all those other things. We just got a clarification from the county on that.
I could tell you, Kathy, probably there wouldn't be much construction. When I say construction, like the tanks are not going to start till probably September, because it's going to take 3 months just to get them manufactured and delivered. So they probably won't start that till August, the foundation. One of the first things they might start would be the small building up by the pump station, start doing foundation. So we wouldn't have, like, I wouldn't say more than 10 people if that was, working at one time.
Right, we still got to do all the disinfecting.
Right.
I'll send you what I got just a couple minutes ago from the county.
But hopefully in June, we're over this.
Yeah.
That's what
You
I'm
have no
hoping
idea.
for.
Yeah, you have no idea what the
I'm gonna guess
workload
now.
might be then. So
Great.
the guys aren't going to be working shoulder to shoulder and in a confined space or anything like that. They're going to be spread out. And
Yeah, I think what might be later than we think. I mean, we were told the other day in a meeting to wrap our heads around the fact that schools might not be, wrap our heads around the fact that we might not be going back by one of our assistant superintendents. So that's end of June. So I don't know when, it'd be nice to be able to start in the summer.
Hey, you guys, I had just sent a text message real quick to Greg Hoteling about that 0% interest on that. And he said, to the best of his knowledge, that's under the hardship program. And he said that we don't qualify because our MHI, or medium household income, is too high for it. He said he'll double check also and see if something has just recently changed, but he said he just doesn't think I would qualify for it.
all right, that's a bummer. All right, so we've spent a long time in the finance meeting, and I guess we have to try to wrap this part of the discussion up. I think it's been really helpful, but I'm not positive where we are, and I'm not sure if obviously we can't make any decisions here in this meeting anyway.
yeah,
It seems like for a lot of reasons that Terry and Jim are advocating that we go forward without rebidding. They said they'd look into the cost of rebidding and let us know. And if that could be revealed before the board meeting, so we would have a chance to ponder it, that would be great.
I'll work on that.
And then I think probably for today, the finance team has done as much as we could do. We might need to end the meeting.
I have a question regarding the parks. With all the review we just conducted, what would our park situation be in the summer? Parks would be open, but we wouldn't have, well, like at Onondaga, we wouldn't have the swimming area open.
No, I didn't propose to cut that. So,
Okay.
So the way I guess I would envision it right now, and Sam and I are going to have to really sharpen our pencils here a little bit, but the way I would envision it based on what I proposed in terms of cuts, we would still have the lifeguards. So the parks would still be open.
Okay.
We would still have our recreation program. It just may have to be reduced a little bit. And then we had proposed in that budget 2 floating parks, what we call park rangers, but essentially just people to help out the parks. I left those in since we'd be cutting the gatehouse so that we could still have somebody around and just kind of keep an eye on things and everything. And then we would, hopefully at some point be able to open those cabins and we'll have to work with Troy and Jonathan and Jeff Winter also to see what we can do in terms of that. That also still left in some of the seasonal help too. So it didn't gut the whole program completely. It just it would look different than what we were thinking it was going to look like.
I wasn't sure of the specifics. I do think that residents are really going to look, is these requirements, these quarantines that we're under now, as that is gradually relaxed, I think people are really going to depend on being able to do something like that just to revive themselves, just to be able to get out and, go in the lake on a hot day, do those kind of things that it may not be a normal, year for us, but at least if they have the ability to do some of that stuff, I think it'll really help refresh people. I think that's definitely what we should do.
And I think it's a really good assumption going forward that we have that, but I also feel like I could see us rejiggering this whole thing as things become more clear in a month or two.
Sure.
But take a second look at the budget and say, oh, this didn't happen, this is changed, we can bring people back, we have to lay more people off. We don't know, but
no.
Feel like this is our best guess now, and it looks to me like a reasonable plan. Very well thought out, and I applaud Doug's efforts. I know how good he is with this kind of stuff. So it's great that we have a good picture, at least for this point in time.
I'll second that.
I'll third that. Thank you, everyone in the town.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, so are we safe logging off, or is there anything else anyone else needs?
Doug, did we want to touch base on the agenda, like printouts and
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sam and I were, I don't know if it was email or text yesterday, just kind of shot a message back and forth. Traditionally, we print out packets and everything for you for your agendas. Can we just email those to you? I mean, can we?
Just email.
Okay, all right. So we could actually.
Linda, you got to come back and get yours.
Yeah. We'll post it on the website and then we can just send them the link. That's probably the easiest way.
To do the bills by scanning?
Yeah. Oh.
That's. Yeah,
I know
that's.
I know
I don't
that's.
think you want to.
So rather than sending us the link, is it possible to send us the email? Because often that's what we have open, and the link can be kind of dodgy at times.
Sure, we can do that. The other thing that we could do is, Kate, are you still with us? I just don't know if you're with us still.
Yeah.
Kate, can't we could print them the abstract report and they could see, we could email that to them.
Yes, I could absolutely provide that, that expense approval report that you sign
Yeah.
off on that details each of them. I think it would be difficult to try to combine all of the invoices with each specific
Right.
voucher page.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But the report would still, you would see every single expense with every
Absolutely.
vendor. So you'd see all the information, just the supporting detail that we attach, you wouldn't have all that.
That would be helpful because a lot of that stuff is,
Yeah.
stuff we see all the
Right,
time.
do we have can we remotely sign them or just voice approve them for right now?
What we've been doing is just voice approving essentially everything for right now. And then we'll worry about signing them later,
Right.
backdating it with the date. We're recording these meetings anyway, so there's a record of that.
Okay.
The other thing that we might be able to do, if there's something you guys really want to look at, let us know. We might be able to get you a temporary VPN access. We have a limited number of licenses, so you could actually log into the system and then actually look at the actual invoice that's attached and all that stuff. But it would probably be easier if we just provide you the report, and if you have a specific question, let us know.
Yeah, I think that would be easier.
That's sufficient.
Agreed.
Yeah, because, electric bills and stuff like that, unless they're crazy high or something, most of that we don't,
Would it make sense to put on the agenda some sort of approval of the fact that we're doing things so virtually? So, during this COVID outbreak, would that make sense to document that we've, as the town board, have approved that?
Well,
Yeah,
your
we can do
minutes
a
will
resol-
note that everybody's in attendance via virtual through the
Right.
Zoom. The minutes say that.
Well, and you guys made a motion in your last meeting that we had that approved us doing all this, as long as the governor's executive orders stand. So,
Okay,
correct. That was my recollection as well.
yeah, good, thanks. All right, hear anything else? Going? Bye, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Enjoy the snow today, everybody.
All right.
Thanks.
Wow, this
Yeah.
is going, yeah.
I was just gonna say, look at it outside, Jim.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Okay, bye.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye.
What am I doing here, Kate? What am I doing here?
Leave meeting. Leave meeting at the bottom right.
Oh, okay, there it is. Thank you.
Yep, bye.